Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Saturday Free School for Philosophy and Black Liberation. So today we're going to continue our discussions from last week on deindustrialization and poverty, and we're also going to talk especially about North Philadelphia. And I think the people on the live stream might know about this, the North Philadelphia History Festival going on, and some have been some of the events. So today we'll also be reporting back on that. So I'll ask Doc to start the discussion.
Thanks a lot. It's good to be here for us. We want to return to the question of deindustrialization because in a larger sense this might become, and I think it should become, not just a topic, but a research project that will take place over, many, many months, that we should, that this narrative about deindustrialization in Philadelphia is, well, I don't even know that there's a narrative about it. It's rarely, how would you say, rarely a part of any major narrative about Philadelphia, what Philadelphia's dreams are, what it wants to become. You listen to politicians, they don't ever talk about deindustrialization. In fact, politicians and academics and others, social activists, have no idea of the history of North Philadelphia. They don't know anything about it, which to me is a little off-putting, and I'll explain why. I think I did say some things about it last week or maybe the week before, but I want to say a little bit about the history of North Philly. In a lot of ways, the history of North Philly is a history of Black Philadelphia after the defeat of Reconstruction. Before the defeat of Reconstruction, you had the Free Negro community, which organized around various institutions. For instance, down the street, the Institute for Colored Youth, which was an institution for both vocational and higher education of Black folk. And institutions like Mother Bethel and like this church, like Zor, Methodist, Mother Africa Zor Methodist Church, and others. That was the Free Negro community. But after slavery, there is something new that happens. And I want to talk about that because to talk about that history is to help us understand not only Philadelphia and the Black proletariat here, but Detroit, Chicago, because there are similar patterns. Okay. But as I tried to do last week, is to connect the crisis produced by deindustrialization, and it is a profound crisis. It is almost an irreversible crisis for the Black working class and for the working class in general. But I connect it to empire because the two together destabilize the economic, social, and political system of this country. Deindustrialization made a city like Philadelphia poorer. Not only poor because you had more poor people, but poor because fewer people paying taxes, because they're not working. More people are on welfare, more people are dropping out. So the city to compensate or overcompensate for the decline of tax revenues because of people not working, what they start doing is all around, everywhere you go, you got to pay to park.
Right.
You know, which is just a super taxing, and the harassment of ordinary people through all these petty regulations and fees and everything, where in a lot of ways, home ownership is more of a burden than anything else, where at one time people aspired to owning their own home, even if it was a small 2-story on a little street, to own a home. You know, now the taxes, the fees and other things, it makes home ownership a serious burden. So the city is poor. The nation is poor. A big part of the country experiences a dark and tragic landscape. And Michelle and I were just mentioning this in passing yesterday. She was at the funeral of the young man who was killed in that one of the young people killed in that Grays Ferry shootout. And she said that she could see concretely what this long death march of young Black men looks like, you know. And this is something we'll explore, and because poverty produces many other things, but more than just individual poverty, it is the breakdown of a social system, the Black social system. And this is why the question of Black gods is so important.
Pardon me, Black what?
Pardon me?
Black what?
Gods.
God's goodness.
Gods, yes. I'll explain that, Cynthia.
I got that.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I'm talking about. But what holds this community together? Because there are many tensions, many pressures towards disintegration of the Black community in North Philly and in Philadelphia generally. But we want to talk about that. First of all, North Philadelphia was not always the major area of Black, we call it settlement in sociology. Settlement. You know, where people settle. How did North Philly become the major settlement for Black people, as opposed to South Philly, which was the original site during the period of enslavement? Well, the big thing that happens is the defeat of Reconstruction in 1877. And increasingly Black people, when you talk about North Philadelphia, you're talking about overwhelmingly people from South Carolina and North Carolina. Now, there are people from other places, but you'll always hear, if you say, well, where are your people from? You hear, maybe you heard during the festival, my people from Greenwood, South Carolina. Or you hear somebody say, not Green, there's other one, Green, what's the other Green? They got another Green. Greenville, South Carolina. See, my people are from Greenwood. You know, I'm from the wood, not from the ville. But you'll hear these names of small cities and towns in South Carolina. And almost mandatory, if you went to a Baptist or a Methodist church, they'd have a South Carolina club where all the people from South Carolina hung together, so to speak. But it was the defeat of Reconstruction and the failure for Black people to realize genuine freedom in the South. And the conditions after the defeat of Reconstruction, in many instances, were worse than the conditions, or as bad as the conditions under slavery, maybe worse. And we have to do a lot more study of that post-Reconstruction counter-revolutionary period. And it is not just that Reconstruction was overturned, but everything that went along with it, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution are undermined. Black folk who for a brief moment were citizens with the right to vote and be elected suddenly did not have these rights anymore and were legally defined in state law and federal and Supreme Court decisions as not only second-class citizens, but not even human. And this is, if you really want to understand what is at the core or the essence of Du Bois's social, scientific, and philosophical projects, it was to debunk the lie that Black people were not human beings, that there was no civilization, that and that we were a threat to the civilization, white civilization as such. This is a heavy burden for any people to bear. And this comes almost 10 generations after 10 generations of enslavement. I mean, it's not like slavery and then freedom. There was slavery and never freedom.
Right.
And I mean that, never freedom, which will explain a lot of what we're trying to look at in terms of deindustrialization. Because when you talk about Black people, you're talking about compounding the problem. You know, it's not just race. It's also poverty. It's also unemployment. It's all of this in a nation where you have no rights and you're looked upon and defined by the dominant narrative as the problem for the nation. And that's why Du Bois would say, very simply, Black people are not the problem. Black people are people who have problems. And so on. And so, for instance, South Carolina, to overturn Reconstruction, there's what Du Bois, I think, was the first to put it this way. A second civil war took place in South Carolina, where the Black people were armed and the white people were armed, and there was a throwdown. It turned out that the Black people didn't win. And so that gave an extra impetus to want to leave the South. And you had young Black men who were not going to act like they were in a, what they call a Black exploitation film, one of them Uncle Tom films from back in the 30s, and be bootlicking. They would stand up. And, you know, the most famous instance of this was, by the way, not in South Carolina, but in Georgia, 1899, with a man by the name of Sam Hose, where the man he was working for didn't pay him. He said, "Give me my money. I ain't gonna give you nothing." And Sam Hose took matters into his own hands and was lynched, the famous lynching of Sam Hose, but we can talk about that later. But this happened throughout the South. At least two of my grandmother's brothers fled from South Carolina because they would not accept that bowing down and walking in the street, getting off the sidewalk to walk in the street when a white person walked down the street, and you better not look a white person in the eye, because that could lead you being locked up or even killed. So anyway, I say all that to say, Jim Crow was not just, well, at least we had our own grocery store. No. All the grocery stores in the world wouldn't compensate for the degradation, humiliation, and terrorism that Black folk lived under. And I want to come back to that. So the first great migration occurs, and it's hard to put a date on it because there were streams of migrations. together we could call it a great migration from the South. It occurs maybe the 1880s, 1890s, and continues up to 1914 and the beginning of World War I. But this coincides almost exactly with the migration of Europeans from Eastern and Southern Europe. So you get your Polish, a renewed wave of Irish coming to the country, your Italians, your Russians, especially Russian Jews, and so on, coming to the country between 1880 and 1914, which is the repopulating of the United States with people who would eventually be identified as white. And you know, I don't want to say, we don't have to say a lot about that, but there were material and psychological and other benefits to being white. And people who did not consider themselves white before they came to this country became white, took on that identity, and all of the ideological rubbish that comes with it, which is now coming back to bite them in the behind. I'll talk about that. But you have these two waves of migration. The Black migration was definitely seeking freedom from Jim Crow. They try to make like all of these white people coming from Europe and the Statue of Liberty, trying to seek freedom. Well, maybe they were seeking some kind of freedom, but the genuine freedom was the Black slaves. And there are many ways to indicate this fact, that the two groups, although, you know, we hear the narrative of the immigrants as seeking freedom and all of that, and well, they don't even have a narrative for why the Black people, we just happen to leave. They don't talk about, you know, South Carolina and the Second Civil War and the armed struggle there, the militancy of the young people. They weren't going to take that kind of treatment, and how they come north. And so my grandparents on my mother's side were part of the first, well, maybe not the first, because I think they came after 1914. They came after the end of World War I. But I would consider that part of the first Great Migration. Paused during World War I, but then picked up again afterwards. And so my grandfather, his father was white. In fact, hey, John, you look a lot like my grandfather with darker hair. But my grandfather was John's complexion. His sister, I only knew his one sister, was also light, but their father was a white man who, you know, Nina Simone, who raped my mother late one night under the guise of we were making love type of thing. But the children, although light, knew they were Black under the one-drop rule. And that is something that has never existed in any country, anywhere in the world, except here. The allegation that if you go back 4 generations and they can find a Black person in your genealogy, you Black. Now, most Black people embraced that until they got to the North and were trying to get jobs, so you pass for white during the day and then come home, sneak home by all kinds of strange routes back to the Black community and your Black family. But otherwise, you try to pass for white because there's certain jobs that you could not get if you were Black. But anyway, the first Great Migration is the source of the population that made up North Philadelphia. You know, even today, you all will say to me, they sound Southern. Yes, North Philadelphia is like down south in many ways. Um, and you get the ordinary people, the regular people, even up to this day, you can detect a South Carolina accent in them, you know? And not to mention the behaviors and the food. It's very Southern. And North Philadelphia is very Southern. And Black Philadelphia is very Southern. But this became the part of Philadelphia that we were allowed to live in. And I want to underline this. When I say we could not only could not live in most parts of the city, couldn't go in most parts of the city. And that sensibility remains with me up till this day. You know what I'm saying? Even though you got a lot of Black people in Germantown, I don't go up there because it was, first of all, the Black people up there, they was known as being sedity, bourgeois, you know, and all that kind of thing. But the other thing is, when white people dominated up there, you couldn't go certain places in West Philly, you didn't go. So we were confined. In other words, we were ghettoized. A Black area, a city, a part of the city designated for Black people. And this is supposed to be freedom. And so North Philadelphia became that geography, that part of the city where most Black people coming from the South could live. Because you could rent, and when I say rent an apartment, I wouldn't even call it an apartment. You didn't have an apartment because the whole house, maybe 3 stories, and you might have 4 families living in there. Everybody used the same bathroom. The doors were never locked. In other words, maybe your apartment door was locked, but the front door, you just walk in, you know what I'm saying? This, well, how could you say? Well, this was a human rights violation in terms of housing, but we lived like that. And when I say we, the house that I live in, I can remember many of my friends who had just come to Philadelphia from down south, from South Carolina. And, you know, the mother, the grandmother, and the 4 children, and 2 girls and 2 boys. And they were, and I remember, and at least one was my best friend. We were in the Cub Scouts together. We called him Fat Daddy. I think his name was Bobby, but his brother was named Kootenai. And I still can't figure out where that name came from. Kootenai, yeah. And then his sisters, Sarah and Mary, who were these 2 pretty little girls, you know. And they lived in a house where you had maybe 2 bathrooms. And so half the house used one, half, you know, and the whole concept of privacy did not exist. And so that was throughout North Philly. But they came, the mother and the grandmother took care of the children during the day, and the mother worked in a garment factory. You know, it was that type of thing. And it was a quintessential American working class narrative, a story, not the one that the white man keeps talking. Oh, they came from Russia to work and they brought their Yiddish. Right. Come on, you know, cut that noise out. That's some old fictive, you know. The real narrative is the working class narrative, is the Black people. And that's why I just want to say this. This is why when we talk about the Black, we talk about the Black proletariat. We don't use that same language to talk about white working people, because the proletariat is identified with a different level of consciousness And that's what the Black people have brought. They have always acted in a working class way, have always stood with the entire working class. White workers, let's keep it 100, have never done anything close to that. It was always to divide the working class, to achieve individual privilege, if you understand. And it's even up till today. But anyway, they came to Philadelphia. The second great migration was after World War II. And that's when the boundaries of North Philly had to be expanded. And even parts of North Philly where we could not live, like in Strawberry Mansion, all the Jews, that was a Jewish community, as you saw in the documentary, they all fled. I thought y'all were so liberal.
Right.
They all fled to get away. And the guy in the documentary said something, this Jewish guy who's from Strawberry Mansion. He said the Jews in that area began to speak about a dark cloud coming over Strawberry Mansion. In other words, a Black person might move around the corner. That's the worst of all possible dreams, because everything is devalued if there's one Black person anywhere around here. And I'm not making that up. And that's, as you know, that's Plessy v. Ferguson. But then because of the second great migration, the Jews move out, other white ethnics move out of North Philly. Many times they would go to what became known as the greater Northeast. And, you know, there are all kinds of, if you deconstruct the language itself, it's not just the Northeast, it is the greater Northeast, which, and greater you could substitute white, the white Northeast. And that's what it was. It was the further racial segregating of the city of Philadelphia. This is policy, this is a consensus among all classes of white people. It is a consensus. Nobody wanted to be in a neighborhood or anywhere near a neighborhood where there were Black people. And so a totally separate housing, a totally separate public school system, and of course, Black people create, and this what, I'm talking too much, I want to get to it. This is what they were trying to talk about in this oral history of North Philly, and they get it completely wrong, and I'll tell you how. So by the 1960s, with two great migrations, the Black community in Philadelphia is now making up maybe 25% of the overall population. They expanded the boundaries of Philadelphia to include what is called the Greater Northeast, which is just across the border from Bucks County.
Right.
And of course, if you ever go up to the Greater Northeast, you will see newer houses, better streets, wide, you know, everything looks very different than North Philadelphia. But Blacks could never live in the Greater Northeast. In fact, they built a high school for white people up there called Northeast High School. It was previously on 8th and Lehigh. But then they want to build a new one for white people, the new whites. And so the old Northeast took on the name Edison High School. Why Edison? But everything. Although the laws upholding segregation were in the South, the practice and culture of it was as much alive here as in South Carolina. So the second great migration, as with the first, brought a wave of new workers, cheaper labor. you see. And even though white workers hardly ever fought for unity, they would prefer to keep the working class divided if it meant they had a modicum of extra wage, a little bit better. And they were convinced that the racial organization of the workforce was necessary to realize the American dream. Let me put another one. The racial division and organization of the workforce, white workers thought, was necessary for them to realize the American dream. And this is the difficulty that we even face today. This long history of consciousness where racial supremacy is built into your identity of the better life, the good life for yourself. But so I just but North Philadelphia is also the manufacturing industrial center of all of Philadelphia, but all of this region, and the most highly industrialized area of any city from on the Atlantic coast, going up to Boston and New Hampshire and all of that type of thing. North Philly is a higher concentration of manufacturing than anywhere else. That is why the culture, music culture, art culture, political culture of North Philadelphia is far superior to anything you'll find in New York. New York left politics was defined by immigrants from Russia, from Italy, and so on. The Black struggle did not ever rise to the level that it has risen to in North Philadelphia. And I want to return to that, but just think about that.
Okay.
Now, so here you have a community that emerges from two great migrations from the repressive South, the openly racist terrorist South, where you could be lynched if you looked the wrong way, if you looked at a white person the wrong way, which happened in the case of Emmett Till. So we came to work. Most people that migrated from the South did work. They sought jobs, even lower paying jobs, anything to work to get a start. But then they quickly established institutions, especially the church, but also many other kinds of institutions in the church and outside of the church. Maybe I will go into that, but they established what we call a Black social system. And it was more, and there is no equivalent social system among any other ethnic group in the United States. Nothing close to it. And partially the way you account for it is that Black people, in part because of our African heritage, in Africa there was very little private property. Most property was owned collectively. So we come with this communal, collectivist approach. And you still see it today. I mean, you see it in comparison to other groups in the United States. Very important. We're not just talking about Black people, but separate and on their own. Black folk compared to, let us say, Jews, let us say the Irish, let us say Italians. Any measure of collectivity and collective values Black folk are way beyond any of them. All of these white groups took the path of individualism. And so their culture, their self-identity is tied up with the individual, not with the group. Black folk, if you take a measure, the weight of their view of the world and of how to make the world better is more group and collectively defined and less the individual. White people, it's the opposite, you know. So we established churches side by side with factories. And as I said before, a leader in the factory would be a leader in the church, and vice versa. Black people from South Carolina brought the songs and the ways of praying and preaching from South Carolina to Philadelphia, to North Philadelphia. Like Arthur Fawcett points out, and this is a great thesis, Black people in these cities, that in the face of the counter-revolution against Reconstruction, the rise of Jim Crow, the rise of terrorism, lynching, brutality, and other things, in the cities, Black people had to rediscover God. It was not the God of their slave ancestors. It was not the God of their European oppressors and enslavers. They had to find their own gods. Many people do not understand God and what the God concept means. I'll just say briefly, it is in one another way the crystallization of the beautiful, the just, the loving, the freeing, the perfection that all human beings seek. And those are the gods that Black people sought, not the white gods. And I will argue with any African-centered argument that says that Black people are praying to a white God. Now, that's a complex question because, you know, we are caught in a double consciousness. We see the world in twos. We not only see the world through Black eyes, we see the world also through the eyes of white people. So you can almost sometimes feel it when you go to a church and you know, you have to be able to deconstruct the sermon and the way they pray and the way they sing and different things that go on. But it's very apparent that the God that they pray to is not the same God the white people pray to. The Black God is a God of freedom. And there's no two ways about it, unless you go to just a completely debased and crazy, that's so narrow. But in most cases, Black people seek gods that are Black. That is why Richard Allen and Absalom Jones and all of them left St. George's Methodist Church, because they said the white God, the God that the white people were praying to, was a God of racial discrimination. They didn't put it that way, but that's what they were saying. And so they sought out Black gods of the metropolis. One of the most important social concepts in sociology, although hardly known among sociologists. But this is the beginning of this great social system. I could say that I maybe saw it, how it came about through my grandparents and what they valued and the ways that they lived. This was a social system. in most instances, the ways that Black people lived and sang and danced and celebrated and named, the names we took, had very little to do with the white world. As I said, coming up, I went to a white high school. I wish I never did, by the way. But I never saw that many white people. I may have wanted to have white friends, and I know as a young teenager, a young kid, I was like, well, why? I mean, why don't I have white friends? Why can't I have white friends? You know, but you didn't have white friends. Okay, Black person come in and tell you, yeah, I had a white. Yeah, okay, you did. Most of us didn't have white friends. In other words, you weren't going to no white kid's house and spend the night. They weren't,
Right.
all of our friends, all that we knew were Black people. And that, for me, you know what I'm saying? Here I am, whatever I am, whatever I've done, even up to this day, I don't think I have a white friend. I might have an associate here and there, but I don't know of any white friends that I have. And I don't know that I even want a white friend. It's that bad. Because you don't feel like going through the nickel and dime espionage. Well, what about this? And well, look, read some books. I don't have time to re-educate you into the history. It's always some kind of they the victim. And if you don't open your arms wide and, oh, I understand and all that, then, oh, you hate white people. Okay, maybe I do. I have every right in the world to. If I might have rebelled against the Christian notion of love, but hey, oh, you a Black nationalist. So what? But let me just say this. Part of the problem with having white friends, see, white people think they have the right and obligation to judge Black people. Every white person that I've ever met, at the back, not every, I won't say that. No, don't. Most, in the back of their mind, they believe they have a right to judge Black folks. Which is the assumption that they are superior. And then, of course, not only with all of our instances were we a separate people, but we speak differently. Now, I speak more in the white way. I speak a lot of white English. So the white man, he could tell that I'm Black if he, even on the telephone, they could, because Black male voices tend to be a little lower. You got a little more bass, you know what I'm saying? There's a different rhythm to it. But most Black people don't speak the way I speak. Most Black people speak like you would hear, let's say, Teddy Pendergrass singing. The way they pronounce the words, the grammar and syntax is very different. So, I mean, damn near everything about North Philadelphia was bounded by law, by custom, but by culture and by institutions. Okay? Like I think somebody said in the documentary they showed, and especially North Philly, we dress better, we dance better, the girls are prettier. I don't know about that. They had a lot of pretty girls at Overbrook. Yeah, but we get back to that. But like we dance better, we could, everything, and most of the great music that comes out of Philadelphia comes out of North Philly. Not exclusively, but North Philly. And the great struggles for civil rights emerged from North Philly almost exclusively. this is where you have a problem with the North Philadelphia History Festival. They got a considerable amount of money, from what I could see. And I think the money had a lot to do with what the narrative that they're putting out is. First of all, they start pretty much with the late 30s and go up to the late 1960s. So they're only looking at people who lived or children in that period. And so we're talking about memory of people, the ones that I know, they've lost a lot of brain cells in the last few years. So the memory ain't what it used to be. So a lot of what they're talking about, and the good times, and we went to the uptown, and on my little street, we every Saturday we got out there and cleaned the steps, and we, yeah, all that's true, but that's not the whole story. You know what I'm saying? It is not the whole story, and it is not the essence of the story of North Philadelphia. The essence of North Philadelphia is a history of the Black proletariat. That consciousness, that striving for freedom, that building of institutions, and these were built not by the elites. Everything you see that Black people have in this city was built by the working class, the Black proletariat. If there's a church, if there's a garden of prayer, if there's a United House of Prayer for all people, if there's a Zion Baptist Church, it was built by Black people, Black workers who sacrificed. The story that the festival wants to tell is a story of good times in our youth, in our childhood, when families were intact, mythology, when if on your street and somebody saw you and you wasn't doing the right thing, they would beat your ass, that kind of thing. Not all, yes, maybe, but don't generalize that and make that the whole story. When I know what I saw right across the street from me and my friends and what a slum looked like. You understand? So since your parents may have gotten, or your father, mother got a good gig, and y'all could buy a little house up on Pavia Street in North Philly, don't generalize that to everybody. Because the Black community in that period remained poor. And not just individual poverty, a poor community. We're talking about generalized systemic poverty of a working class with high levels of unemployment. And it's not because they were lazy. And all of the problems that come with that. This narrative about how good it was back in the days, or how it was so good back in the days, why we have to have a struggle? Why don't we just chill and wait till it got better? Why did we have to fight for rights? Why did we have to fight for jobs? Why did we have to fight to break down barriers of discrimination towards employment if it was so good? A lot of that you heard in this festival, and you will hear, is kind of almost childhood memories. And when you're a kid, oh, we were poor. We didn't even know we was poor. Did you notice that you didn't eat you didn't do 3 meals, or you know what I'm saying? The things that were indicators of difficult times, often children don't see it because the adults protect them from it. So you get somebody today that's, telling this story of, my mother treated me like a princess, and I went to dance school and I learned to dance on my toes, and, that's all beautiful, but that's you. That ain't everybody. You understand what I'm saying? And, like myself, I'm from the part of North Philly known as the Tenderloin. I know y'all was asking me, why didn't they ask you to be in it? Because I don't fit in it. See, the part of North Philly they talking about north of Girard Avenue. Actually, maybe, Columbia Avenue, maybe around that. But I'm down below Girard Avenue. That's why I keep talking, the Tenderloins. It's a different vibe. You understand what I'm saying? To put it another, we gang war differently than cats from up, yeah. But see, so I don't fit because my narrative is not, I don't have a rosy glass sunglasses today. Yeah, I'm trying to be suave, from from the Himalayas, but I ain't gonna get into it. But then my life was not apolitical. Everybody in that thing was talking about some personal story, not connected to anything political. And none of them had, at least from what they were saying, had any deep convictions. Now, Alice said it was very boring, and it was. But that's most of what sociologists have to deal with, the boring. That's what I was saying. That's the profession. Because, you go to a place and you sit for 2 hours to get one sentence. Because you're trying to, people, what are y'all saying? And it was a narrative. And my thing is, well, what are y'all saying? What are you trying to say? What did you believe about that time? You know what I'm saying? And that was where there had to be a critical deconstruction of the whole thing and of the narrative. And it has to be. And that in a lot of ways explains y'all's unhappiness with it. And you had every right to be unhappy. I was unhappy, but I didn't show it that much. I tried, oh, how y'all doing? That kind of thing. Just, trying to be polite and nice and everything is everything type of vibe. But let me just I want to give you all a couple of examples. You take John Churchville, very important figure. When I say important, I'm not saying well known, because most of the narrative of North Philly is not even a known narrative. So a figure like a John Churchville or other people that I could name are not known, but they're significant. Churchville is significant. He's from Philadelphia. He went to the South to join the Southern Civil Rights Movement. I think he was a member of SNCC. He comes back to Philadelphia, and this is after the assassination of Malcolm X, when a good part of young Black people had become disenchanted with the Southern movement, especially after the passage of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. Because then the question is, where do we go from here? One narrative among young people was we have to move to self-determination. And we have to fight not just to be a part of the United States, but to be a separate nation within a nation. And if that required insurrectionary violence and armed struggle, so be it. North Philadelphia was an important place for that philosophy of insurrectionary violence based upon the Chinese and Cuban revolutions. A lot of young people thought like that, and as I've told you, including myself, we had misunderstood the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King. Uh, Malcolm X was assassinated in 1965. And, you know, as is the case with martyrs, people heroize martyrs. And we said that he was killed because he was a revolutionary. When Martin Luther King is killed 3 years later, none of us said Martin Luther King was killed because he was a revolutionary. Although a case can be made that Martin Luther King set off processes of revolutionary change in this country that Malcolm could not. But we believed that the only way forward was through insurrectionary violence. Now, whenever you have a great movement, you get many people who want to be a part of that or appropriate a part of that by seizing the stage of history. You know, in a period of a great movement, the society looks very different because now, where it preferred not to talk about Black people and Black inequality and Black poverty, the civil rights movement forced it on the agenda, where it was the only thing of significance to be spoken about. The Black question. Mind you, white people thought through segregation, through Jim Crow, through terrorism, through all of that, that they could forever silence Black people. But the civil rights movement, the 50s and so on, said no. The problem of the color line is the problem of the 20th century. The problem of the United States is the problem of race. That is a great revolutionary contribution. So the reason I'm saying this, because yesterday we went to hear John Churchville, and what they talked about mainly was the Black People's Unity Movement, which, if it was anything, it was about 5 or 10 people. It was not what they want to remember it as, or what they wanted to imagine it was back then. And it was, if you would have asked me, and I would say this to John, I would say this to even Walt Palmer and others, I said, you know, you all were opportunistically seizing upon the spirit of resistance and the struggle for freedom of Black people to advance your own selves. Sound familiar? You seen Black Lives Matter? Everybody, Black Lives Matter. Well, where did y'all go? Black lives don't matter no more? I ain't heard from you in 3-4 years. You understand? And the same thing. So what Walt and them were doing was to put forward a platform which ended up as something adjacent to Black capitalism. You know, we need our own businesses. We need to, yeah, we do need that, but we need more than those things. We need freedom for the people themselves. Okay. This is where, I mean, I can't see it all through you all's eyes, you know, because like they were people that I know. Yeah. So I'm looking at them in various stages of cognitive deterioration and forgetfulness and an attempt to be self-important 60 years later. Does that make sense? See, all of that can play into it and get things distorted. So at the end of the day, you are more important than the people. And all of the narratives of this festival put the individuals above the people. And this is where you all became dissatisfied. Well, they're not talking about the masses of people. You're right, they're not. They're not. And that's why, you know, I don't know maybe I said it to Alice, that they didn't ask me, and I don't feel bad about it. They did not ask me because I don't fit in. First of all, I'm not from that part up there around Temple and all of that. I'm from down this side, I'm from what is known as the Tenderloin, Richard Allen Project, 12th and Poplar, 12th and Wallace, Penn. That's where I'm from. So the names and people and events that I think about and talk about will be a little bit different from that. The churches that I identify with, they talk about one church all the time, the Church of the Advocate.
Right.
That ain't the only, excuse me, that's not the only church. And if you notice, I talk about the Garden of Prayer, Mother Dabney. I talk about Bishop Cherry. Now, and I talk about my own church. But by them not knowing the churches, see, you take John. John went up. John, okay, let me, I'm sorry, y'all, if I'm a little bit. Churchville, and the reason I'm so interested in him, because he was this flaming revolutionary when he came back from the Southern movement. He got up, he went back to his home, I think he's from North Philly, and on Ridge Avenue, set up this Black Freedom Library. A young man with the spirit of change, and he is going to teach Black history to Black children. Beautiful thing. But his library also became a place where there would be lectures and revolutionaries and intellectuals would come through. I was there maybe twice. I was not, because then I was in Chicago and then other things. And I remember John very well. He remembers me as a kid, And I remember when he suddenly made this transformation and became a really hard Orthodox Christian. And for us, it was, well, where did that come from? But he had some kind of epiphany and some revelation, and he became a Christian. But the thing that's so interesting, and what I wanted to know, what kind of Christian, and why did he leave Christianity, or the mainstream Christianity, to go into a type of, I don't know what it was, a unique theology, where he no longer interacted with churches and institutions, but had communities that or a congregation that would meet at his house. I wanted to talk to him about that. I don't even know that I will get the chance. But that, interestingly, was not a part of the story that he told of himself, which I felt was the story that needed to be told. How did you go from the Southern movement to Black nationalism to Christianity, and then to a very sectarian form of Christianity? What gods were you searching out? But he didn't talk about that. The documentary that we saw, which, I'm talking a little bit too much about this. It was really a Ken Burns PBS documentary. That's really what it was. Yeah. Everything about it. It's the Ken Burns PBS format. Great archival photographs and interviews. Have you ever seen a Ken Burns documentary that is not that great? I mean, and the person that has to be, well, two people you got to put all the weight on in a Ken Burns documentary. The person that does the archival work to find the photographs, and if anybody in free school can do that, I'd like to, because we got to do. And the narrator. Ken Burns has the best narrators of all time. And in this, they did a wonderful job with photos, and you could see things in Philadelphia neighborhoods, and the whole time I'm saying, "What is that?" That kind of thing. But it obscured more than it clarified, because it did not talk about the working class.
Yeah.
And certainly, the period that documentary and that this festival is addressing was the period where deindustrialization began in North Philly. So already, while they were young people having fun, as young people are supposed to do, going to the uptown, singing doo-wops on the corner, maybe, having a fair one when you fight with your hand, on the corner, being a part of a teenage gang where we from 25th and Norris, y'all, which is, what, you're 16 years old, you're a man, all of that kind of stuff growing up that you have to go through. But even while that is occurring, even while Motown and Stax and Philly Sound are emerging as these great generators of music and pop culture, the ugly specter of deindustrialization has already begun, which will, in a decade and a half, render North Philly a tragic sight, where the upward trajectory of people as a result of struggle and Reverend Sullivan and all, getting jobs, and as they said, good jobs, and women going into factories, and the unionization. I remember hearing people, well, we ain't got a union yet, we're gonna get a union. People would, we're gonna get a union. They would talk like that, or we need a union. Just, that would be dinner table on the street, in the bar. I got a job, now we're gonna get a union. And almost everybody worked. And always there are people who cannot work, who become socially disabled, the trauma of life, drinking, and then heroin came in and that was a burden. But most people work. Most people were looking for a job. Good jobs. If you can get a job on the waterfront, he worked down the waterfront. Had to work down the waterfront. He's gonna try to buy a Cadillac and drive through North Philly. I work. I got a good job. Or somebody get a job down the Navy Yard. So and so work down the Navy Yard. And these were jobs that Black people could not have. But I just want to paint a picture of a culture, a social system, a spirit that we would fight to better ourselves. And then in the throes of all of this, which is not spoken about, alongside the ideological and consciousness movement, this was a period of great ideological debates. You couldn't go in a barber shop without debate. People debate. No, you're wrong. We got to leave this country. No, the white man is the devil. These would be the debates. You go into the church, it would be a different kind of debate, but they would be debating the deacon board. People leave the church because of the ideological position of the pastor. You understand? It was a period of great debate on all levels. The great leaders of that time were Cecil B. Moore and Leon Sullivan. These were towering figures. I don't know that there are many cities in the United States that were graced with two leaders of this magnitude, who were seeking civil rights and economic rights and a new culture. That was all a part of the mix. And I know that's what y'all wanted to hear. I know that. And it wasn't said because I don't think the people that put this on even know about this. One of the things that was really striking is the institutionalizing of a new aesthetic. You know what I'm saying? You know, every, and I put quotes, minority group suffers under the burden of the dominant aesthetic, the dominant religion, the dominant politics, the dominant narrative. When it came to aesthetics, questions of art and music, questions of painting and sports, everything was kind of defined by white people. You couldn't have a black quarterback, they said, because black people were not intelligent enough to be a quarterback on a football team. And since you needed an intelligent person, well, who better than a white person? You know? But then at this period, we create a new aesthetic, a new music. Sun Ra's in Philly, but there are other people. There's Archie Shepp. You know, there's the whole jazz, bebop, hard bop phenomenon, which is about, in this period, to take a new revolutionary turn. So younger players like Lee Morgan or young John Coltrane, it's all driven by the same thing. They're individual geniuses, but they're individuals who come out of a collective of genius, a new music. And then from that, we get the Philly sound, which is second only to Motown. New artists appear, and that's where you get Edmonds and Richard Watson. What's Edmonds' first name? Walter Edmonds. He was the one that came up with the idea. I want to paint the ceilings of the Church of the Advocate like the Sistine Chapel. And they couldn't quite get the scaffolding together. You know, the scaffolding was too expensive. So he and Richard Watson create these historic murals that fit perfectly into this neo-Gothic cathedral in the middle of North Philadelphia. Nothing like it had ever been conceived or carried out in the history of Philadelphia art. Nothing close to it. And I'm not against the Wyeth. They're out in Westchester and, you know, painting, you know, that's all beautiful. You know, the singular white woman running across the plains. And,
I know exactly what you're talking
you know, I mean, how many times I have to look at that? But now here you get, they take the Church of the Advocate, which is owned by the diocese, but appropriated by the people. That's what we did. And they made it a palace for the people. Father Paul Washington. This is for the people. The Second National Black Power Conference. The Black Panther Party Conference. The funeral of Lee Morgan. It was a center of movement activity. But it was connected to art. On North Broad Street, somehow John Allen and his associates took over what was called the Heritage House and turned it into Freedom Theater. And it was a theater for drama. And many actors that you see, famous actors, came through Freedom Theater. You see, white people dominated the arts and theater in the nation and in Philadelphia. And they would always say, well, we can't hire this black actor because she is not trained. That's always the thing. You ain't trained. Like, well, anyway. So Freedom Theater becomes this place of not only putting on plays, but training actors. Then there was Philadelphia, and Ile Ife, both of which are parts of a long history of African American dance in Philadelphia, coming out, as Karen said in her interview, coming out of the Catherine Dunham School. This would crystallize at the highest level with the Ailey Company. But we had the same thing here in Philadelphia. So the great civil rights movement, which was a struggle for economic rights, it was a cultural revolution, a new black aesthetic, was a part of this movement. It was a movement to free black people and to save this city. Black folk did not give up on the city. In spite of everything, we fought Rizzo. We fought the racist political establishment. We fought the Democratic machine. Everything was to change the city. And once it was realized that black people would become the largest, most significant population, then the ruling class shifts from urban development to suburban development. And the white masses went along with it. And that's the whole suburbanization thing. And they got caught out there and couldn't swim. You know, they was taken out into deep water by the ruling and can't swim. Oh, we're gonna move into a nice neighborhood where there are trees and the schools are better because there are no black people. And then you got caught up, especially when the price of oil went up. But okay, let me just go. In the mix of all of this, young people began to explore revolutionary and, in fact, internationalist movements. They began to read Mao Zedong. They began to study the Cuban Revolution. They paid close attention to the revolutionary and armed forces on the African continent, such as Amilcar Cabral, such as Samora Machel, MPLA, in South Africa, the African National Congress. The same young people began to embrace the Palestinian cause. This was all in the context of the civil rights movement, which was most appropriately defined as a struggle for freedom. And that's why the search for similar experiences, you know what I'm saying, around the world that we could learn from. But by the mid-70s, much of this was coming to an end. Probably, and I don't want anybody to take this the wrong way, probably one of the more dramatic indications of the end of a period of upward ascendancy and freedom and the beginning of a counter-revolution and a downward descent was the rise of the MOVE organization. The more I think about it, if it is symbolic of anything, it is symbolic of the rise, at least in the consciousness of the city and in the media and so on, of this organization who looked down upon all significant black values and literally said, either you're gonna follow MOVE or you're the enemy of MOVE. It was the announcement of the end of a period of struggle, with all of the problems of generation, the youth being more militant or so-called militant than their parents, even the issues of religion and the attempts to achieve unity, with all of that, all of those problems, you could, in spite of it, see light at the end of the tunnel. MOVE represented the beginning of a dark period. They were a counter-revolutionary organization in a moment in history that was a counter-revolution against the Black movement. MOVE was as anti-Black movement as the white supremacist system was. And even if they came here today, I know so many of them and their children. I mean, it's not like I'm talking about people I don't know. But I would say this: you all constituted a counter-revolutionary movement, but they survived based upon several things, that they were able to achieve a certain narrative hegemony. They were really expert at that by carrying out what would seem to be crazy acts, for instance, demonstrating at the zoo to free the animals. Yeah, they did that. Yeah, they were the first abolitionists. You know, there was an abolition, zoo abolition. Did you tell me you were interested in that? You're going to no. I'm only joking, Kat. And then the state of Pennsylvania and the government began to redefine what is poverty, what makes one eligible for welfare, food stamps. The counter-revolution was ending the war against poverty. You remember King in his last speeches talk about war and poverty. War is the enemy of the poor. He's talking about the urban proletariat and so on. By the 1970s, 10 years or a little more after deindustrialization started in North Philadelphia, it becomes national and is announced by the Reagan administration and by major policymakers that the American working class has become too expensive, that the American working class must be forced to compete with workers from very poor countries. And if we couldn't compete, which meant that the wages, benefits, and other things of working people would be cut into in a major way. And if you didn't want to compete like that, then don't worry about it. We will take the plant and move it to Mexico, then to China, then to the Philippines, then to El Salvador. Deindustrialization meant the movement of capital out of the country and left the labor movement high and dry. It had no worldview. It did not know how to fight. It did not learn anything from the civil rights movement. And it was still caught up in white identity and white supremacy. The labor movement of the United States has always operated on the principle that you could fight for labor and still be white supremacists. And they believe that to this day. And this is the frustration of the social democrats and the so-called labor radical. No, you can't have them both. It's an either or. So deindustrialization has been the official policy of the United States corporate and government structures for over 40 years. The dramatic parts of this, Philadelphia was not as dramatic as to see the dismantling of the whole auto industry of Michigan and Detroit and move to Mexico. To see all of the steel plants of Cleveland and Pittsburgh and Massillon, Ohio, and other places, just up and take the whole thing somewhere else. And then to tell the workers, with no filter from their union leadership, who are a bunch of bums to allow this to happen, that, well, we're going to retrain you to do data entry. You know, or if you can't get that, maybe you can get a job as a security guard. Person say, what about my union? Don't worry about that. What about my health care? You ain't going to have that either. They totally dismantled the working class of this country. And thus, well, I mentioned this, I don't have to say any more about that. But the study of North Philadelphia in the ways that we want to do it, and I think the way we propose doing it is really the only way it can be done with any coherence, is to look at things in their totalities and to look at Black people as a people who are as much a part of the anti-colonial Afro-Asiatic movement as they are part of the democratic movement in this country. Thus making Black people unique in modern history. There is no other group like this. People say, this is why the Afrocentrists are such a counter-revolutionary ideology. They say, well, we have to relocate ourselves in Africa. My argument is, no, we don't. That would be a disaster. We got to acknowledge Africa, but we can't relocate ourselves in Africa because Black folk in America have advanced beyond most African nations and their leaders. And what I'm saying, I would say to, an African, South Africa, I was involved in that movement, by the way. So, I mean, to romanticize Africa in a way that diminishes Afro-America is a crime against Afro-America and against Africans, because Africans have a lot to learn from our struggle as we do from theirs. But their struggle is not our struggle. I say this in part based upon the fact that my father's an immigrant from Africa. There ain't nowhere in the world that I'm going back to the Cape Verde Islands, where he's from, and he wasn't going back there either. It's a nice place to be from. But I say all of this, that to know North Philadelphia is to know the history of this country and to know something about the history of the modern world. And so our study of deindustrialization will be a holistic study. I think we're going to have to do it for many months and do a lot more research and a lot more going around North Philadelphia. Big question becomes, well, what is North Philly? Where is North Philly? And as I've always said, it's more than a geography, it's a demography. It is a culture. When you say North Philly, you're basically talking about Black Philadelphia, even though people from North Philly moved to West Philly, You say, where you from? Where you go? I grew up at 53rd and Osage. Right. I said, well, where you people from? 15th and Columbia. You know what I'm saying? So you just recently got to West Philly or West Oak Lane. But then the other question is, with the gentrification of North Philly, with Temple and all of that, is North Philly now West Oak Lane, Strawberry Mansion, Olney, Lower Germantown, parts of West Philly, big parts of West Philly? Is that the new North Philly? In a lot of ways, it looks like what North Philly looked like. I think this festival is an advertisement. They did it with Harlem, before they fully, gentrified Harlem. They were all celebrating the Harlem Renaissance and Duke Ellington lived on this street, and Auntie Cullen lived here. You know, yeah. But the purpose of all that celebration of the Black cultural past is to prepare the present for the gentrification of Harlem.
Right.
And this whole thing is a advertisement for the gentrification of North Philadelphia. Because it was not, yeah, I'll stop.
Thanks, Doc. Doc, what was that, in the second Great Migration after World War II? That was, I only have a really brief question. Why did that happen? Or like, what was that in response to?
Well, it's what they call a push-pull.
Okay.
The push were the horrible conditions. And people wanted to get out of those small towns and get where there was more economic opportunity. You have to remember that the history of capitalism, modern capitalism, is the history of cities and the history of the locating of the productive and industrial forces in cities.
Okay.
And so that was the history of the United States up until the early 1970s when you deindustrialized. But the industrial history of the United States is the location of productive forces, technology, and industry in cities. Black folk, second migration was by that time 50 years, maybe 45 years after the first migration of Black people, but the biggest migration of the Europeans from Eastern and Southern Europe. That was the big one, where the nation becomes more white and almost for a period irreversibly white, because these immigrants, European culture, would easily take on white identities. So the second migration, there is no second great white migration from Europe. There's only one great one after the Reconstruction. But we had two. Now, there was also a migratory pattern towards Philadelphia, of course, but also towards Chicago, but a later one towards California. But I think the motives and what was pushing that was different than from the South and Mississippi and South Carolina up to places like Chicago. Just one thing.
Sorry.
The migratory pattern to California was disproportionately Texas, Louisiana, like that. We were from, I guess you would have to say, from those states of the Confederacy, which were the main centers of cotton production. So not only are these, we have to look at the human beings that were part of this migration. They were people who had always worked. They had a proletariat consciousness. They were tough people. They were not people who were afraid or anything like that. And so they were coming here for jobs, knowing that the jobs that they would get would be the poorest paid, but they were prepared to make that sacrifice.
So the first migration for Philadelphia specifically was coming from North Carolina, South Carolina.
Yeah, and other places, some from Virginia.
Even Georgia or whatever.
Yes.
But then the second migration was more general.
No, I think
Also
to Philadelphia from the same places, and maybe a few more coming from Virginia and Florida, maybe Georgia.
So I guess not specifically from the revolution, or
So
what you had said about the armed struggle, or in South Carolina.
the Second Civil War.
Right. It was different circumstances, still pushing people.
I think South Carolina is a special case because of the Second Civil War phenomena, when it was an armed struggle. I don't know how long it lasted. I have not studied it. But where blacks and whites were armed and they fought. And the blacks were defeated ultimately. Part of the turn back to the Confederate governments of the southern states, slave-owning governments, and the descendants of that, was that the whole nation, the whole ruling elite, felt that black folk had to be controlled. And the best way to control them is to put the slave owners, the children of the slave owners, back in power to command the state. And so there's always, I would say, and Purva brought this up, and she's absolutely right about it. In policy making, government policy making, there is more than not something motivating that is not just
Right.
data, it's a sense of revenge. How dare you black people fight against slavery? How dare you fight for civil rights? Now we're going to pay you back for it. I see it so palpably clear. And that's, yeah, I'm sorry, but go ahead. Go ahead, Sue.
No, it just reminds me of that other piece of the conversation you were bringing up about segregation being, or that is alive in a city like Philadelphia.
Yeah.
As much as it was in South Carolina.
I would say so. Except you could say there were perceived more economic activity because as opposed to South Carolina, you have to realize that after slavery, the South was never industrialized until after the Civil Rights Movement. The South remained economically less developed. So people were coming to a more developed, industrially, a more developed part of the country. So it was a push because of the poor conditions and the Klan and all that.
Right.
But then there was a pull from the industrial base. So you would see that they're coming to work in factories. They're not coming here to go to Temple University. They're coming to work.
I had a small question, which is, after the Immigration Act of 1965, when more Eastern Europeans came into the country, and a lot of people say that that diluted the representation of Black people in the country as well. That didn't happen very much in Philadelphia.
And what you mean, the immigrant?
Yeah,
Oh no, very huge.
okay.
Very huge. Philadelphia is a major endpoint of European migration. Always has been. Going back to the Germans in the 17th century, up to the Italians, Jews, Polish, and so on in the late 19th, early 20th century. Oh yeah, but their migration, I think it is estimated that maybe 20 million Europeans over a period of about 25 years migrated to the United States. And that's where you get the Statue of Liberty, this myth that give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free. And it's supposed to be them. When in fact, it was the Black people who were the tired and poor and the huddled masses yearning to be free. It was the opposite, but to see the white thing, you cannot see the Black thing. So the Black thing and the true history of the Black thing is obscure, but that was as much a migration as the Europeans, but it presented long-term different problems because Black people could not be white. You know what I'm saying? And the country was not prepared to become racially equal. This is huge. So white people come into an environment where they will have opportunity. Black people come into an environment where they know they must fight for opportunity. You know, and it's, yeah. So it's different as day and night. And so Black people if you take the history of consciousness of Black people, are both looking to the United States, but looking to the world, especially the darker world. That's why you get all these Black intellectuals, Du Bois, Baldwin, anybody saying damn near the same thing. Or King talking about my pilgrimage to nonviolence. What is it? My pilgrimage away from Western civilization.
Right.
I mean, it's just all over. So we don't fit in to the existing order and such. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that, like what you said, after the migration of Black people from the south to the northern cities, soon after that, a migration of Eastern Europeans happened soon after that. And
Probably around the same time.
yes,
Maybe, see, the European 1880. So, Reconstruction is overturned in 1777. So right after that, and so this period of the rise of the U.S. imperialism, U.S. as an imperialist power, occurs after the defeat of Reconstruction. In fact, the defeat of Reconstruction may have been a conditionality for the rise of the American empire or American imperialism. So, which then makes whiteness ever more necessary. Because, see, it's not just American imperialism, it's Western imperialism, and the imperialism against who? Against the darker races. You know what I'm saying? And so we quickly, when I say we, I'm talking about the intellectuals, the activists, the revolutionaries who were leading the people, saw very quickly that we had more in common with the darker races of the world in India and Africa and China than we did with white America. That white America was not prepared. I mean, yeah, you could say objectively, a white worker in a steel plant and a Black worker in a steel plant have a common situation. They face a common exploitation. Well, if that's all you want to look at, but that's not the whole story, because even the plant was racially segregated when you could get a job. Even the factory, even the unions were racially segregated. So, yes, we will fight on the class front if y'all will cooperate, but then our vision is of a world movement. And so, gradually, the paradigm shifts, and Black people, even, I consider this a little bit of a dark period, a low period for us, but even in this period, Black folk tend to see themselves as part of a world movement of the darker races. I dare say that you could find a Black person that would speak on this who would deny that. I mean, every Black person from the Al Sharptons to the hustler down the street would in one or another way acknowledge that we're part of the anti-colonial people. And of course, the Nation of Islam did a great deal to popularize that notion, even going so far as to identify Black people as Asiatic Black men. This is huge, not as European Black men or I mean, isn't that extra? I'm still trying to figure out in this search for Black God. We're Asiatic. We're not a part of y'all. We're separating from y'all. Isn't that interesting? We don't want anything to do with you. I mean, that is a profound kind of narrative in the face of a nation that can never be united as long as whiteness as an identity and white supremacy as a system persists. Go ahead.
Well, I have a comment, then I want your opinion. You brought back memories. Well,
But you're from South Philly, right?
actually, we left Strawberry Mansion
Oh, boy.
at, I was really little, but I remember the word came from Blockbuster. What does that
Be a
mean?
place.
Like when,
Oh, yeah, when a black person,
yeah,
would go
yeah,
and move into a
exactly.
white
Was,
neighborhood, use
every
block,
time
yeah.
outside, it wouldn't get white if it got more Jewish. They start leaving.
Okay.
And, people on Fairmount Park, 33rd,
Yes.
and Cumberland.
Mhm.
And, a lot of my friends would see somebody walking around and say, Venda, Venda. And then I found out that was a Yiddish word. So a lot of the black kids would, if they wanted to like harass one of the Jewish people, they would talk among themselves like they're speaking in pig Latin. But I want to talk about something I noticed, the relation between the gang members and the doo-wop. Meaning, see, I just remembered I had an older cousin that was the king of the Moroccans.
He was of the Morocco.
Yeah, yeah. What they call them, Moroccos?
The Moroccos.
Yeah, meaning that, see what it was, my oldest brother, he was older. He would take us to 32nd Street.
And what? 32nd and what?
What was that? It was a movie on 32nd.
Yes, yeah.
What was that?
I forget the name.
Park Avenue, Park Avenue,
What was it called?
Park Theater, the Park Theater. was on-
32nd, but what was it?
It was on 30th and Diamond,
Okay,
32nd
32nd.
and Diamond.
32nd and Diamond.
32nd and Diamond.
No,
Yeah,
my,
yeah, yeah.
my cousin would walk us down the street and he would say, you see these two? If you mess with them, you will have to deal with me. I didn't find out until I went to California. He must have been 60-something years old. He said, oh, I was the king of Morocco.
The
And then-
Morocco. Wait, hold on. Let me just say this real
Morocco.
quick. I don't think the Moroccos was over there. That was the Valley.
That was
Where
the-
was the,
He was over there with the Valley. That wasn't the Moroccos.
Morocco was the Spanish game.
Huh? No. The Moroccos was Francisville.
Oh, really?
now, where were the 290s?
29th and Diamond.
Okay, 290s.
Oh,
Yeah,
29th.
my cousin lived down around 15th in, Parish.
Damn, you know
So what
You're
area
bringing
is
my
that?
memory back.
Yeah, because he from up there. He from up on Lehigh Avenue.
Oh, okay, from that, around Broad Street, Lehigh?
No. He from Strawberry Mansion. He's in more upper
Are
level.
you,
28th Street.
Blues Rock? No, but actually that was it was considered moving on up.
Absolutely, no question.
It was
Yeah, like, Fairmount Park,
yeah.
the sand pile, the bathrooms. I mean, you know, they were clean then.
Yeah.
No, but I remember the doo-wop singers, and then see, I didn't understand. To me, a gang was not pointed out as being neighbors, they were protectors of the neighborhood,
Right.
and they were very talented. And the social structure was quite clear, meaning that when everybody acknowledged they called them the leader, the king, and then you had the soldiers, and they would be on the corner singing. And then a cappella. First time I heard a cappella singing, and I thought but you know what happened? They would try to get into a music school or something, and they tell them, oh, you're not trained. I didn't know that they did know, but they didn't know in the way that the system felt they should know. But I didn't start, so when I always saw people who played by ear to be superior.
Yes.
You know, like I knew, like on the block, somebody would play for a church, they could improvise. So you had the church musician, you had the jazz musician who played at Natalie's, then you had the doo-wop singers. So when I used to go to Ben Franklin music program and the conductor would be like this, I said, John, they don't have any pipes in there. You know, and then it dawned on me, oh, they actually think they're superior because they could read music, but the ones who didn't read had all of them. Like, I'm in the reason I brought that up because it seemed to me that the deindustrialization
Yes.
it's all interconnected with the degeneration of the culture,
I think you're right.
dismantling of things.
Yes.
And the public school used to have those wood shops and all that. So part of the deindustrialization, taking out the shops in the school, I think it's almost like they systematically destroyed the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And they look, give you the impression that, oh, it's a broken down, degenerate neighborhood. I don't remember that. Like you said, I remember people working all the time.
Yeah.
Particularly if they came from the South, they had that work ethic.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and the gang member was a protector of the community. So even if I had, like I had oldest cousin, somebody would bother my brother and I tell the cousin, he said, I'll take care of it. He'd go back out, he'd come back, he said, you don't have a problem. So it was undercover, covert, you know, you had the so-called gang wars sometimes. But again, Tony, if you look at it, they still were protectors of the neighborhood.
In many ways, yes.
You know, like, and I'm not talking about the new gangs. I'm talking about,
But, heroin and then crack were also factors. Heroin, I know I'm from the Richard Allen Project area, and that was always, the model for public housing, so on. And when heroin hit in there, and the Tenderloin, a lot of cats from the Tenderloin, they became drug dealers.
Yeah, that was the stereotype that I learned when I came back to Philadelphia. But I was thinking about that older
the 50s
style where you were protected. But I noticed.
I think you're right about that.
Yeah, definitely I could see how it was, like you said, drugs. They even had rumors that the black Muslims were drug dealers.
Yeah, and some of them were.
Oh,
Yeah, go ahead, Michelle.
No, I also appreciated your presentation because I feel like what it made me think about is how I think there are very few cities or very few regions of the city in the country as a whole that can so well capture like the ideological history of the last century or the sociological history of the last century and more, because like North Philadelphia cannot be talked about unless it's talked about in its totality, like you say, or the way that I might think of it is in civilizational terms. Because like you gave this broad sweep, but there are so many aspects. Like some of this we've already investigated through our study of the music. And something that I was thinking about was how in our first interview with Leo Gadsden, but also with Alfie Pollard, we dedicated portions of the interview to understanding the history and like the people's culture of emerging from North Philadelphia. Like Du Bois would say, this neighborhood that was filled with submerged kings, or like Black Genius, a cradle of Black genius and what it came out of. But what we had said in that interview with Leo Gadsden is like, the liberals or the progressives in this city would call Philadelphia a cosmopolitan city, right? A city that is an underrated New York, or a city that can exchange with the world, mediated through a white conception of reality. But what we asserted in that interview is that men like Leo Gadsden are evidence of Philadelphia as a world city, as a city that is rooted in like a civilizational history that has drawn from and given to the common modern struggle for freedom, like in Africa, Asia, throughout the 20th century. But like there was so much you brought up, like with gentrification, for example, or deindustrialization, and what explains this genocidal service economy today, or even explaining the original migrations and how they need to be connected to the defeat of Reconstruction, and then more like what I was thinking when you were talking about all of that is that I think what's missing, and this is intentional, in the consciousness of people when they try to look at a neighborhood like North Philadelphia in its continuity, is that understanding of the counter-revolutionary period. What it begins, like when it begins after the assassination of King, and how it's not just an economic counter-revolution, it is an ideological counter-revolution. And I think that's something that we're really gonna need to place or to make central, because that's when you were talking about what explains the organizations like MOVE or there's just a lot in what you were saying that I was trying to put together. But
Can I just say one thing?
yeah, go
You know,
ahead.
this relates quite a bit to our notion of the so-called white left.
Right.
Because, you know, while any objective understanding of MOVE would have to see it as a counter-revolutionary organization, they saw it the opposite. They saw it as the revolutionary organization for
Right.
Black folk. I mean, it's, you know, and so this is one of the things that we wrestle with, that this white left is in fact a part
Yeah.
of a counter-revolutionary movement.
Right.
I think so.
Right. Right. Yeah, I was also thinking about Kensington and how it needs to be a part of this. But yeah, there was more I wanted to say, but I'll come back to
And
it.
Kensington became one of those sites of occupation of people who came in the migration from Europe in the 1880s.
Right.
And so heavily Polish, maybe some Germans, heavily
Right,
Irish,
right.
you know.
Well, I think part of what we're investigating or trying to assert is really what could explain the best of North Philadelphia, this self-organization of a revolutionary
Right.
world
Yes.
historic people, which is Black folk,
Right.
and what that was beginning to create an entire renaissance, but really the birth of an entire civilization, which is reflected in the music, which is reflected in the churches, the political consciousness, the movements, and then when and how it was picked apart, systematically destroyed. And I think that a continuous history of North Philadelphia, which is a continuous like ideological and sociological assessment of the American people in the historic struggle for freedom, has not been done. And even like when we mentioned the North Philadelphia History Festival, it's I like that you framed it as the beginning of an attempt on
And, no, an
gentrification.
advertisement for gentrification.
Yeah, right. Because I liked the comparison you made to Harlem as well, in terms of how much Harlem has been gentrified and how the narrative around Harlem is very similar to the narrative of the North Philadelphia Festival around North Philadelphia. And I see part of our work as mounting that defense on the people's revolutionary and democratic history and their capacity, like under Black leadership. But yeah. I think the last thing I wanted to add for the festival is like, I don't feel that this type of effort has been made to capture North Philadelphia as a whole before by a nonprofit or an ideological organization in the city. And I'm trying to make sense of why now, because
But they don't capture all of North Philly. That's one of the.
no, I know. I mean, I think it's a bad faith attempt, but I'm still trying to assess why that attempt is being made right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, that's okay. Yeah. Well, it also says something that so much of what you said today is knowledge that is not broadly known. And people talk about, let's take the Inquirer as one example. They'll talk about Kensington, or they'll talk about the manufacturing history of North Philadelphia, or they'll talk about Temple and gentrification. But so much of the true narrative of the neighborhood, which is an ideological history, is really not known and it's not talked about. And I think North Philadelphia has almost been taken as, I don't know how exactly to say it, but it's like an ideological, it's like an ideological battleground that has been very like ossified in a certain way.
Oh, go ahead. Sure.
Remember this, you keep saying about the North Philadelphia historical. What is it?
Speak up just a little bit. Cynthia.
You're saying things about the historical North Philly, are y'all gonna set up some type of, is it a program? Is it a day of?
Oh, you mean the festival?
yeah.
Yes,
It started Thursday and it'll go to Sunday.
Thursday just passed.
Yeah.
And
Who's gonna-
we're going to some
Do
things
you usually
today.
do it in this month of July?
This
No,
is,
but it's not organized by us.
it's a
Who
different
is it organized?
Scribe. They're like on Lancaster Ave. They're a nonprofit.
And it started this Thursday.
Yeah, it's this past Thursday.
And it's till today?
It's just Sunday.
It's tomorrow.
And then they had the list of events on their website. Yeah, but we went, when we met you, we were on our way to go to some of the events.
Oh.
Yeah, because I think I told you about it.
I think you did.
Yeah, but you went, yeah, you were like, oh, I have a
Yeah, I heard about it.
blog.
Okay, and that's Thursday.
Scribe.
Yeah.
I just,
Scribe video.
I wanted to add to what Michelle was saying because I've been thinking about this a lot. I think it was very interesting to go see parts of the North Philly History Festival at a time when, as Free School, we are also getting ready to do these sociological trips to understand North Philly, to answer some of these questions about deindustrialization and poverty. Also, this question of Black gods. And, like, you know, on the face of it, it seems like that's sort of what they are, or at least that's how you'd advertise it, North Philly as the community that needs to be understood, its history needs to be understood. But when you actually go and see some of these interviews that they did or the documentary they put out and the general narrative around it, it seems so opposed to what we think are the important questions. And this question that Michelle asked, which is why now? Like, why are they interested in this history of North Philadelphia now? It's something that I have been thinking about also. And the only thing that comes to my mind, obviously this won't be an answer, but I feel like there is a reason why organically we also move to this direction, that this is something that needs to be done now as the next stage of the political struggle here, to understand what is that proletarian consciousness, what really was made possible by the Black consciousness in the city, and what was the counter-revolution that took it down. And I think that these questions have basically maybe reached a point where they're unavoidable anymore, and they're living in the minds of people in various ways, even if it is not articulated like we would articulate it, like in the same language. But the fact of poverty, the fact of deindustrialization, the fact of this daily genocide, or how you put it, this death march of young people, I think it's becoming more and more maybe impossible to just deny and unsee anymore. And I feel like this is almost a way to direct those questions or to direct the narrative towards, away from the actual
Well,
substance.
can I say, I think that's what I find the most disturbing about
Yeah.
the way Scribe is organizing around North Philadelphia is that, okay, if it's framed as North Philadelphia history, what about the history that is happening right now, which is like a genocide on a Black community that in North Philadelphia, and like the ghettos, like the service economy, the gentrification, all the drugs, the incarceration, everything. And I see it as nothing less than, well, maybe someone with a little bit better historical understanding can fill it in, but like, I just keep thinking about what's been done to Harlem and how like it really has been an attack and a stripping of the human energy and the human consciousness emerging from Black people who have gone through a historic process in the struggle for freedom. Like, to assassinate Harlem in that way, which has always been like the people. And same thing with North Philadelphia.
The only big difference,
Yeah.
North Philadelphia is a center of manufacturing. Harlem was not.
Yes, exactly.
But I just had two more things to add to it. I think the framing a historical also has a very specific purpose, I think, because I think as soon as you talk about history, it goes to this thing of, there is like, we are trying to give respect to, the people who actually did something and so on and so forth. But not everybody talking about history actually sees how, or tries to really deal with the question of how can this history be used? How can it explain something? Where all of the interviews we saw, or at least the ones I saw, there was a distinct feeling that this is something in the past, that belongs in the past, that can never be captured or be used in the present to answer some of these concrete questions that people face. And the other thing that I was thinking about is recently, I mean, I guess in preparation for, all of the, to study deindustrialization, I was looking at, that book which Doc you had mentioned, American Apartheid, talking about how the ghetto was created and the segregation which underlines this generational back poverty. But then going to this festival and looking at gentrification, it made me realize that gentrification in some ways is a different beast altogether, especially the kind of gentrification that Temple has managed in North Philadelphia, the brutality of it, and just like it's on your face and you can see it. And so that's again something that I've been thinking about a lot. The interaction between creating these pockets, the segregation, isolation of Black people, and then gentrification, where now the energy is being directed towards basically disappearing Black people. No idea of where they're going, or anyway.
No, but I just want to say this, and we talked about this yesterday. It's gentrification where you take the roots and the branches that there's nothing left. And that's what they have done in North Philly. Root and branch, destroyed communities.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of build on Herba and what Michelle said well, first of all, I was really impressed with what you laid out, because honestly, like, you always give great presentations, but there's something about, like, I don't even know how to describe how important I think what you just laid out is, and the way you did it, because I have been trying to make sense of, I went to 2 days of the North Philly festival tour, basically with you, I guess. We went together. And I was trying to identify what is missing. Because it almost feels like a personal or an emotional missingness, where I'm like, why am I a little emotionally unhappy? And there's something so important about the way you connected here in North Philly. This is what Michelle said, you can actually get an accurate history of what happened to the United States of America over the 20th century. And like the way you even connected North Philly, where you have manufacturing, there's a reason why, that even the way you described why the different streams of the Great Migration, this wasn't just Black people saying, oh, let's pack our things and go. It was fleeing the Jim Crow South. And in some ways, I feel like the reason why I feel like the history of North Philly is so important is because we also are seeing the creation of not just communities, but an alternative social system, an alternative way of living, an alternative response to the brutality of a white supremacist social system that has dictated, and it still imprisons all of us in the United States of America. And that is the potential of, if we are to even have a future of freedom, comes from how do human beings respond to white supremacy? Because here's an example. It was just, well, okay, I'll first say, it was really emotional to hear you say, what was missing in the North Philly historical tour is, what about, how do you drive, you just can drive through random streets in North Philly and you will see different spots of struggle. The OIC, the Opportunities, actually not an acronym, the OIC by Leon Sullivan, or you pass by a United House of Prayer for all people, and then you pass like Zion, you pass Zion Church, you just pass all these almost like little dandelions. It's like a field of dandelions in what should have been just a freaking block of concrete. Nothing was supposed to come out of it. And instead, what you get is just so much struggle, but with the very little that Black folk were given, and despite the brutality of the attack of the system, instead what you get is the strength of a people saying, there's a different way of living that actually connects us to the truth of what human life should be about. And there's something so emotional of having almost the framework, because the festival, it gives you individual stories, which are to a certain extent important, individual stories of human beings' lives, what it was like to be on your block. But what about that framework of, no, these were freedom fighters. These were freedom fighters who not only were individual courageous people, individual fighters, but then they created institutions, like the way you said, institutionalized aesthetics, a totally different vision of, I don't worship, despite 20 decades of slavery, to this day, I do not bow down to the white god. You know, that's deep, because the alternative is me, for example. I'm the child of Chinese immigrants, and in one generation, what's more common than not is people like me, the children of these Chinese immigrants, we just fold. We don't know, but we fold to the white gods without knowing we're folding to white gods. But then here you have Black folk in this country, generation compounded violence, being told, oh, why don't you just like, most people would be like, oh, just assimilate to white standards. Instead, what you get is an alternative social system, an alternative way of living, and it produced the best culture in the whole world. Like that music, jazz, rhythm and blues, like stuff that the whole world knows the United States for, but then white Americans don't even want to give it all of its due credit. And that I think is the significance of North Philly. I also thought it was deep the way you pointed out. You basically pointed out when you're talking about the migration of European immigrants, that a lot of what we say are white people today are not just one group of white people like the Pilgrims. We're talking about basically, you know how like in academia people are like, oh, the peopling of the US or like the peopling of a place. Yeah, the United States is basically, you have all the peopling of many different generations of people from different countries who all become categorized as white. And then you have a historic people, Black folk, on the other side. But it's kind of this deep thing where you kind of get a sense of, this is a country that has not even achieved itself as a country. There is no consensus. It's a battle that has not been won, and that we must win. It's a battle to make America, to actually achieve an America that does not have a consensus of what we ought to be, what we should be, what's right. And that's a battle that has to be waged. And the problem with something like the North Philly Festival is it obscures that there's an ongoing battle. It obscures that there's a battle that has been slapped down, that has to actually be picked up. Like this, it should not be. It's not just about.
But you know, it's interesting. If I could just,
oh yeah, sorry.
You know, if you might agree with me, I think y'all would agree. They treat North Philly as a neighborhood.
Yes. Yes.
Not as a social system.
Yes. That's the key.
I'm sorry.
And no, even the next point is that there's something important about Wien Free School, that we see it as the Black proletariat. Yeah. That this is not just, we're not just talking about Black people, but the fight of the Black proletariat. Like there's something moving about, here you get the Black proletariat with the little bit that they get, the jobs that are lower paid than white jobs, that out of that you get a great democratic struggle to improve wages, to make really great homes, good neighborhoods, to fight for better access to education, and not just for Black children, but hence the whole city is transformed because of it. The whole city is bettered because of it. And I was really just moved by the phrase you used, Doc, of like the significance of identifying even in the 70s, in the 80s, the remnants of essentially all what the great leaders fought for, Cecil B. Moore, Leon Sullivan, and all the people they taught and mentored, the musicians who are still going strong, the churches who are still going strong, that you have to see it as a cultural and economic revolution. That it wasn't just to like live your lives. Like we were not just trying to be comfortable, but actually it was to save the city.
No, that's no question.
To save the city. And it reminded me how Baldwin was like, the only option for Black folk, no matter where you move, like I think Baldwin was talking about like Watts versus LA, where he was like, there is no such thing as peace in my heart. Because to be a Black American.
Watts versus Hollywood.
Oh, Watts versus Hollywood, just a few yards away few miles away from each other. Because like, there can be no peace for me. There's no rest. There's only struggle. That is the condition of, that is the story of Black folk. There is no rest. There's only the struggle to not just achieve freedom for Black people, but hence achieve freedom as freedom, human freedom. And yeah, so that's why I was really, why I was really moved by what you're saying, because I think it's what you were saying, Michelle, which is the story of North Philly that has to be documented, captured, known. It's the story of a battle for a new civilization, the battle for a new America. And it's also the story of America itself. And it's the story of what is the human response to the injustice and violent brutality of a white supremacist social system that also brings us to war around the world. And or do you take the white path, which is individuality? Let me get a little bit some for myself, even if it means others are put down. Or is it the Black path? Is it the path of we have to fight for collective freedom? That there's an injustice that has to be changed on the whole for injustice to never be reproduced. Like, you know, so yeah, your presentation really, I think, moved me in that way. And
You have moved me. You have moved me.
Doctor, I have a question for you, since you get done. And this is kind of connected. I've always been interested in, like, we had these pre-emancipation, freed slave society. You know how you read and it says, the reading about the freed slaves in Philadelphia. And I was reading and I noticed the occupations. What if I see the pictures? You got suits and cat compacts and buggies and, you know, people playing piano, what have you. What was the relationship between the Great Migrations, you said basically so like during the 1880s, and there was a free population already here. How did that gel, or did a class system develop as a result of that?
A class system.
Within the
Yes.
so-called.
A class system, but class differences among Black people are always muted by the external forces of white supremacy. I would say that the new arrivals from the South were seen as giving us a bad reputation in Philadelphia because, the ones who are already here, you country people, you don't know how to talk.
That's what I was going to say,
Yeah.
like a linguistic
Yeah,
prejudice.
linguistic difference. But
And
I think in the institutions, because see, Mother Bethel was not the Garden of Prayer or the United House of Prayer for All People. By this time, Mother Bethel is very Methodist, very Episcopalian, in their ritual and their hymns and so on. And then down the street, you got the United House of Prayer for All People, and they playing trombone. They have a trombone orchestra, and they just, kicking it out and praising the Lord. Or you get Mother Dabney, who says she's a prayer warrior. Whenever you need prayer, come to her. This is vastly different than the religious life and the gods of Mother Bethel and the gods of Prophet Cherry, I think, are different. Because the people who are newly arrived are aspiring for other things, have seen things that people who had been, quote, freed Negroes in Philadelphia for generations had never seen. They've never seen a lynching. They've never seen where Black people have to get off the sidewalk and walk in the street when a white person walks by. So they never saw those things. And the ones that came from the South, they were tougher. They were more determined, I feel. And that's what I would
is
say.
that what resulted in the, like you talked about Germantown, the light bright area?
Oh, the light
versus
bright,
the
yeah.
Richard Allen, the dark skin.
Mostly, that's right, absolutely. Most of your
Yeah.
light brights, what we call light brights, are yellow bones,
Red man.
or red
Red bone.
bone or yellow bone, yeah, or both.
Well,
They would live in a separate area of all light-skinned people.
Well, I noticed that, like, we moved up to Sharon Hill, you had Chester,
Mhm.
and then you had Yaden, and then you had Sharon Hill. And when I went to Yaden, my friend told me, he said, well, you won't have a problem here because everybody here is lighter. He said, but he was brown. He said, I'll just sit in the car. This is Yaden. But now in Chester, they used to think I was from Yaden. So I was saying that.
But you were lighter than most people in Chester.
And then when I went to Germantown, then it started dawned on me in Philadelphia, not only do you have these class differences, it seemed like the lighter ones tend to want to live closer.
Absolutely.
I guess there was hope.
No, there's no two way. And this is something that I did not mention. The proletariat tends to be darker complected than the middle class among Black people. So we have what Du Bois called a color line within the color line, a color hierarchy, which is also a class hierarchy in the Black community.
And you also had a lot of Blacks who didn't want to play anything, like in terms of music, folk that was Black, because that was low in your class.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm light skinned and I play Mozart.
Yeah.
So I'm up here.
Or even the way they sang the sorrow songs.
Yeah.
They sang them in ways that would make them acceptable to a concert stage.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go to the United House of Prayer for All People or to the Garden of Prayer, you know, they ain't thinking about singing at the Academy of Music. That's not on their agenda.
Call response.
Yeah, call response, the loudness, the whole phrasing and the chord structures, because that's where a lot of the new chord structures came from, dead out of the church.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
But that's what, like, when I went to Europe and they say, American music, they call it American music.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, oh, so Black music became American when it goes. And then what I learned a lot about Philadelphia, and they said, oh, you play the blues? Now I think you play Mozart.
Yes.
And remember, they look at salsa as being Black.
They look at what?
Salsa. And
Salsa as being Black.
Yeah, because it's associated to Cuba.
Yeah.
See, they don't call it salsa. They were introduced to Afro-Cuban music through the Valdez family, going way, way back. So when you play anything from America and it has a Black beat to it, they'll sit and listen to you. Now, if you sound too white, they won't listen to you.
I can understand that.
You know, it's just because they already have it there.
They have that.
And they looking at it, style, culture. You know, can you play a jazz? Can you play? Nobody actually can play Mozart. But then a lot of these singers, opera singers here, they say, I'm going to go to Europe. It'll be better for me. Then they find out they go to Europe and nobody wants them.
Yeah.
A Black opera singer. You've done better to sing a gospel tune.
Go ahead, Samir.
My introduction to North Philly was 10 years ago, so things have changed. But I just want to say I don't think we've said anything new, because if we had a bunch of OG North Philadelphians in here, they'd be saying the same thing, that the community was injected with drugs, and that the music was controlled by music executives, and gangs were encouraged, etc. But I remember the contradiction that forced me to meet North Philadelphia was in Students for Justice in Palestine. People were saying, well, if you're opposed to the displacement of Palestinians, why aren't we as equally opposed to the displacement of North Philadelphia? And so that's why I got involved with the Stadium Stompers movement. But this conversation reminded me of the speech by Louis Farrakhan 2 years ago, the last time he spoke, and he talked about the two books, Rise and Kill First, about the Israeli Mossad, and then he talked about We Charge Genocide by Paul Robeson. And I think it was so prescient that he brought that up, because of what our conversation is today. And it does confirm that the Nation of Islam, that people from North Philly do agree what we're saying here is that there was displacement, not just moving people, but we're making it unlivable for people to live, but also what you're saying, removing the culture. And that's what I think the difference between the gentrification of people in South Philly and Northern Liberties and the displacement of Northern Philadelphia is they removed people of a distinct, we'll call it a social system, but people of a distinct ethnic identity were removed. Where places like Strawberry Mansion went from being owned by business owners and a place for mansions, and then it went to, what it is today, which is one of the most dangerous neighborhoods. But a neighborhood like Kensington can experience an up-and-coming revival. And I think that we can say that that was a policy decision. If Catherine Runt were here, she would talk about, Philadelphia 3.0. But the last thing I wanted to say was I met Ruth Burchett, some of the women who led Stadium Stompers. Okay, second to last thing I'll say is, one of my first Stadium Stompers meetings, that's when everyone came, they weren't small. And someone came up and they said, homeowner or not, we're all in this together, we're all being displaced, and we need to be together. And then the next man came up and he said, no, we're not together. I'm a homeowner and we're not the same, as renters. We're not the same. And I said, oh, okay, there's something here. And then the last thing I'll say is, Ruth Burchett in one of the meetings, because they had invited the state senator, his name was Curtis something. This is 10 years ago.
Curtis Thomas.
Curtis Thomas. And, Ruth Burchett was giving him the business. And, she said that she was a registered Republican. This was 10 years ago, Doc, when we were talking about the Trump movement. But you said something that struck me back then, which was that Ruth was a woman who just wanted to watch. She had grown up and she talked about the Cecil B. Moore riots, and she had grown up in North Philadelphia, but now she wanted to watch North Philadelphia burn.
Ruth?
Ruth. Oh,
she said that?
No, you said that about her.
Okay.
But I think she did, what turned her from being a young woman who grew up with Cecil B. Moore in her neighborhood to wanting to watch, North Philadelphia burn. So that's something I think about. And, I also think about, real OG North Philadelphians that I've met, and not, the people who are paid to work for Scribe. And one time I went into Temple's liaison office into the community, and, I think about that hustle. And then just, the North Philly Festival,
And you see, the other thing is, just apropos, I just want to build on what you're saying. North Philly became the center of the movement to reform politics in the city. And you have all of these people running for office, and then it spread to West Philly and to Germantown. But this movement was very important, and I don't think it's documented. So much of this is narrative history, memory, and so on. But North Philly has been valuable to the Democratic machine nationally and locally because of the numbers of votes. And I think there was a political rebellion. I think we should keep this on our radar. There was a political rebellion in North Philly in 2024 in the presidential election, where a significant part of Black men went for Trump, and a bigger part of North Philly did not vote at all, which represented dissatisfaction with all sides. I'm just saying that Ruth Burchett became so frustrated with the way the Democratic machine used Black voters and Black people that she just said, to hell with it, I'm going to rebel, and I'm going to register as a Republican. And she's lived in that area of North Philly all of her life, up there around the Church of the Advocate. And she's been an activist, a community person. And suddenly she just said, no, I can't do this anymore. You will not use me. in this way. So I think also North Philly has always been known as the place where great rebellions, great struggles, and that's why anywhere else in the city, they could have gotten that stadium, but North Philly.
Well, that's where the student protests in '68, the black student, protests with Frank Rizzo cracked down on
67.
happened.
Yeah.
And then, North Philly also produced Mayor John Street, but
Not really.
Oh, you're right, he's West Philly,
No, Norristown.
He's North.
Yeah, not even Philly, but that's another question.
But my point in bringing up Mayor John Street was the betrayal had been
Oh, yeah.
so long since the '90s.
Before then. So I think before then, before the Frank L. Reagan. I grew up in his administration.
Go ahead, John.
You were talking about the working class and last week about how, it was like, for me as a child, my memory, it was like everybody came home at the same time.
Right.
Everybody came home at 4:30. And most of my neighborhood, of my memory, everybody worked. There were two incomes, both the husband and the wife worked. They were intact families. There were no single mothers in my neighborhood. You mentioned busters, and I forgot about that term. We were considered busters. And we moved in that area in 1951. And they would leave buckets of urine and feces on our steps. And I remember playing with the little girl down the street, 3 doors. And her father came home and he said, "I told you not to play with no N-word." And he beat her, kicked her, and I never seen that. And I never heard that word. So I asked my father, what was that about? And why did he do that to her? And he said, well, he's afraid. And like 2 weeks later, they moved. We never saw a truck. They moved, I don't know, they said they moved in the middle of the night. You never see a truck. You never see no movers, you never see no front, but the house was vacant. And one by one, it was white flight. And that's it.
Hey, John, that was up there on Lee. What area were we talking about now?
28th and Lehigh.
28th Street.
Okay.
And my father, he looks white, and he could probably pass for white. And he had a cousin, they grew up in the same house. And they worked at the same company. They were two different unions, but they worked at the same company.
Which company?
They could not associate together.
Which company?
He worked at Yale and Town.
Huh?
Yale and Town.
Oh.
I think that was up in the Northeast. He was a machinist, and it was that they could not associate together.
The unions.
At work.
Oh,
And they grew up in the same household as children. But at work, they could not associate.
And why was that?
I think it was color.
One was passing for white, yeah.
Yeah.
His father.
And, but after work, they were home. And it seemed like everybody in the neighborhood, they got paid on Thursdays. And so on Fridays, you would see the men go to the neighborhood bars, and they would get sloppy drunk.
These are the white men.
No, these are black,
Black.
in the neighborhood. And thinking now, they drank or got drunk because they had so much pain and frustration. And I was talking to a friend the other day that moved to Ghana, and he was saying that, I was just imagine that for 35 years you did the same thing. You put 4 screws on a bolt. And you did that for 35 years. And you never missed. My father, he worked for 35 years. And I only remember him missing 4 days of work. So it was you were talking about the work ethic.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, I don't know, but I think they got some kind of compensation for being sick. But at 35 years, can you imagine just taking 4 days off? And that was, he had some surgery. He missed some work. But the work ethic that people had at that time, and families were intact. And then the 60s, that was a new revolution. I'm Black and I'm proud. And it gave people a new identity to start feeling good about themselves. And that's when I left. So I've been absent for 62 years and coming back, it's so painful. It's so painful.
Tell me, could you explain that a little more? You say it's so painful.
Yeah, to see the disintegration of the neighborhoods that I remember that were very welcoming, very warm, caring, and there were life-to-life connections. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody were friends. And even neighborhood friends, they were like family, and you call them your cousin. And today, for me, or my observation is that there's such a disjointedness with people, and everybody's suspicious. Why are you treating me so nice? What do you want? You must want something. The church trying to treat you as a human being. So I don't know. It's just painful. Painful to come back to see. It's like this. It's like seeing someone that you had so much hope for, and they just given up. Yeah, that's the big word. Given up. Hopeless.
Can I just say one thing? You know, the part of North Philly where your family moved to, that was considered, I don't know how to compare.
The strawberry.
Yeah, that was all white.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. And most of us were back down below Columbia Avenue, or not quite that far west. So like you say, your father and uncle worked at Yale Town. That was they may have been the only Black people in that factory. Because those were really both good jobs. And as I mentioned, the Northeast, which were newer factories and so on. Back down here in North Philly were the older factories. And especially, well, this is interesting. I don't know how you remember, because around there where you grew up, just east of Strawberry Mansion, east and south of Strawberry, east and then south, a lot of factories that are still up there but abandoned. You know what I'm talking about? So, yeah, I know you were in a more stable, down where I was. That's why I mentioned my friends being migrants with their parents, mostly their mothers and grandmothers from South Carolina. And my neighborhood was not a stable working class, although it was working class, but it was, immigrants from the South.
Well, I had some things I wanted to say, but I feel like John, what you were saying, it really impacted me. I think this was already brought up, but even this question of comparing like Philadelphia to New York, I think there's a lot of people who are like, New York is the American city.
Right.
New York represents really like what America means. And I think that's a very common narrative that I think people are taught coming to the United States. And yeah, it's weird because it's like, I didn't grow up in New York, I grew up in Dallas, but the more I've gone there, and maybe it's different for like Alex because you grew up there, but like, the more it's like, actually New York is very unlike the rest of America. And there are a lot of reasons for that, but really focusing on North Philly, it's like when we've gone on tours there, like when you've taken us on tours there, when we just visited, like in the sense that there's literally like blocks where it looks like a bomb has been dropped. And there's like these just craters where houses used to be. And it's not just the physical infrastructure, but also the human destruction and the human craters there where, like these actual, the community used to be. I think that is what has been done to the people there in many ways is the most reflective of what has been done to the American people. And when you like, especially when you're traveling, like you're doing like road trips throughout the United States, and you pass by these towns where it's like, like whole towns have been destroyed, both with deindustrialization, but also drugs and all this stuff. That in many ways is the thing where it's like the most commonality between what has been done to North Philadelphia and then what has been done to these other parts of the United States, which no one really wants to talk about. And really only I think has come up with, I feel like, especially in the past 10 years, with Trump and everything, and those parts of America which are the angriest because of what's been done to it. And I think I guess the larger thing that it's been making me think about is, Doc, you emphasizing that at the end of the day, when we talk about the narrative of deindustrialization, you have to focus on the human factor, and especially that sense when you brought up the sense of revenge that the ruling elite had towards the people, towards Black people. And I bring it up again because it's very easy. Actually, and this is argued on multiple sides by multiple different kind of people, but like, it's very easy to look at something like deindustrialization as like a kind of almost like just a kind of structural thing, and something that actually is like, oh, like of course it would happen this way. Right. There's like an inevitability about it.
Yeah,
like like well, obviously, well, partially it is true. Like there are laws of whatever you could say capitalist development, which is like, like of course capital will seek cheaper labor to exploit. Like there is a dynamic to it which is law-like. But I think to only describe it as that misses actually the real story, which is yes, there are like these laws and whatever, but it's also like to remove it from the like human factor is to remove it both from the actual motivation of the ruling class, but also of the people, and the capacity of the people to even change, quote unquote, the laws and structures of society. And it's again, like even something like the Great Migration, or the two Great Migrations, you can't explain what happened with Black folk moving from the south to the north kind of purely as just like an economic phenomenon.
No.
Yeah.
And you actually have to, in order to explain
Absolutely.
why the Great Migration happened, what happened in the midst of this great human drama, you have to understand like what are the strivings of people, what is the consciousness of people.
This is very important what you're saying, and this is why we had to move from the political economy to a larger sociological analysis, because, you know, it's an explicit racist essence to the argument about the inevitability of capitalist laws of development, as though people do not make these laws, you know, and as though, and because the thing is to say to black people, well, get over it. This happened to the whole working class.
Right.
Bullshit. Bullshit. That's why I tried to say deindustrialization began for North Philadelphians in the late 50s. It would be another decade or more before it became a more general phenomenon. And the other, I agree with you completely. I don't want to hear that, because what we're looking at, this is what Michelle draws it to, this death march of these young black men. Oh, that's the laws of capitalist development. Bullshit. You know? And I'm sorry to use that language in the church, but it is terrible. And it's, you know, you can only imagine, and I say this as a black person, to hear some white person or some political economist tell me about the inevitability of all this. And to a Jewish person, I say, oh, so the Holocaust was inevitable. So you accept it because that's part of the laws of capitalist development. So you're saying that we should accept our plight because of the laws of capitalist development? No. And this is where we are so different. Well, as you know.
Right, and I think that's it's part of the larger, I feel like, project of free school, which is like, this quest for a new social science that explains all this. And it reminded me actually of even Baldwin, especially towards the end of his life. Like I think I kind of underestimated this, but Baldwin, like especially in like the late 70s, early 80s, was basically talking about the kind of genocidal program against black people in the wake of, or in the midst of that counter-revolution against the Black Freedom Movement. And he has that essay, like House of Bond, like Notes on the House of Bond, which we've read many times over. But I feel like we don't really talk, because there's this part where he says, perhaps only black people realize this, but we are dying here out of all proportion to our numbers, and with no respect to age, dying in the streets, in the madhouse, in the tenement, on the roof, in jail, and in the army. And this is not by chance, and it is not an act of God. It is a result of the action of the American institutions, all of which are racist. And it is revelatory of the real and helpless impulse of most white Americans towards black people. And basically he's saying, like, black people are faced with what he calls, quote unquote, the final solution, and having to outwit the final solution, which is basically, genocide against black people.
That's right. And this is why, you know, all of them were so disappointed with this festival. None of that, the Baldwinian view, that this is not just, oh, North Philly is changing. There's a genocidal essence. When you pull things up from the roots, and this is the roots that people have built. It's not, you know, we established these roots, and just to tear it up as though it didn't mean a damn thing. And this is what they've done.
Right. Yeah, just the last thing I want to say is I wasn't able to attend any of the festival events, but based off of what you guys are describing, it like taps into something which I've been thinking about for the past year or so, which is like, on the one hand, the memory of the people is an asset in the struggle for freedom.
Oh yes.
Like the memory, like everything that you guys are talking about, like actually like your memories growing up in the city, what you saw, how it changed. I think all of that is a great asset to the people, and especially to the younger generation. But I think the flip side of it is essentially, I don't have a better word for it, but it's like nostalgia.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
Yes.
it's like this,
It's
this-
not even good memory.
and it's like not even, but it's also because like, well, sometimes not everybody remembers the same things, and not everybody has the same things to remember because not everybody is part of the struggle.
Absolutely. There's no question.
And I think that's important.
And part of, if you're going to do sociology or ethnography, if you're going to do that, part of the role or function of the social scientist is to be able to differentiate between the quality of narrative. I mean, there were people there whom I know, who I'm just trying, wait a minute, that it didn't happen like that.
Yeah.
You missing something, money. You understand? And I even asked Karen Warrington, I said, but you never mentioned Arthur Hall. Why not? She never answered it, by the way. Although she was one of his principal dancers.
And yeah, and I think, so just the last thing is that, I guess both in the question of like, just like, what were you actually involved in?
No, this is
in that
very,
period,
that's
but also,
right.
what I'm trying to say is that like this whole nostalgia thing, like to me, it signals a kind of capitulation and almost a kind of
No, it does.
like signals kind of cynicism. Like, it's like a kind of cynicism of like, oh, things were so nice in the past, and the best we can do is just sit around and kind of reminisce about things. And it's because you're confronted with a situation now which is so dark, in which nobody really wants to confront head on. And because then to confront it head on would have to actually require you to make real choices about where your place is in all this and what you choose to struggle for, what you choose to live for.
Question.
And like instead, because people are capitulating and because, I mean, there are things that like obviously like part of this is because Black people have been so disappointed and so beaten upon by the system and by the ruling class. But it's like, in the midst of all that, like to just, I don't know, have this kind of almost like, like things happen and it's bad and we can't do anything about it. So the best we can do is to just reminisce about how good times.
No, that's it.
And I think that's the part where I get the most disappointed.
No, it's very and it's insulting. I mean, I spent much of yesterday that we were together trying to tell them to be a little more patient. But then I had to think, why would they sing it the way they did? And, Purva in particular, she was, oh God, and it is, I mean, it comes off as special pleading to the white man, trying to show the white man there's some good Negroes up here trying to hold on to the memories of North Philly. You understand? Well, he said, Negroes seeking white approval, and funding, by the way, which comes with white approval. But, I mean, that is not, they asked me, they said, well, Doc, why wasn't you asked? I don't fit in. And I'm not hating, but I don't fit into that narrative. I don't fit into the what they talk, because I wasn't on one of them little streets. I didn't live on one of them little streets where everybody knew. I live where I live now, and in the Tenderloin. It was different. So I didn't, and then I can't depoliticize it. So I don't fit in. And I don't mind not fitting. I never fitted in too well.
I want to address the issue that John, you probably noticed this. See, when you're going a long time, you come back, you notice a cultural genocide. See, the gentrification, the changing, that's why I always get lost. When I come to Philadelphia, sometimes I go down the wrong street and go around. Where am I? Especially when I went to your neighborhood, I couldn't find your house. That's why I had to call. That's what you address. But I want to talk about this. See, memory is connected with, like, say you grow up in your. See, I remember Lee was there and that neighborhood, her kitchen, and those memories I still have. When I had to get used to, it's something about not feeling welcome. Like when I came back, I wanted to use the temple library and practice rooms, and I walk in the building, everything's cold, like a mausoleum. I wasn't welcome So I emailed the department head, said, can I have permission to use one of the practice rooms? Oh, no, you have to be a registered student. So since I've been back, doors have been slammed in my face. And I said, I can imagine what the average African American in this city feels. And I mean, even in Jersey, when I moved to Maple Shade, do you make 3 times the rent?
Yeah.
And I said, oh, this is a way to see the gentrification. But when people stipulate, they say you have to, if it's 1,500, you have to make 3 times that a month. Then they say, preferred occupation, teacher. If I were a mailman, I couldn't even live there. So when I walk in the place, oh, hello. But I barely passed the brown bag test and I barely passed. Suppose I were just a proletariat. Suppose I worked for the post office or the shipyard of the consent. They would probably just in an email, because everything is email, file how much you made. X, delete, you get the email. So it's a feeling. Now I have a way of pushing myself on people. I learned at Temple. You don't let Temple push your rank. Oh, you don't like me? Well, you get over. But everybody is not that. They fly off the handle quick. There's what I feel in Philadelphia is an angry black man. Everybody's walking around, and you said, "Well, what are you looking at me for?" See, it built up over the years, and then it's generational. You take the young ones here. Well, the parents were probably the grandparents of the ones we're talking about. So each generation, the anger starts with the deindustrialization, the gentrification, and the anger, and then flying off the handle, then you get a gun. That's how you solve it. So it's all interconnected.
Yes.
And I consider myself a peaceful person, but since I've been back, I had to get aggressive with a few people. I go park around Temple. Do you have a pass? And I always get tickets now. Places where there were no, you can park. Like I used to park down around 8th Street, what have you. I'll come back, there's a ticket. So between ticketing you, putting these stipulations on salary, occupation, it's a type of discrimination.
No, it is. And he said knees, that's what my mother was called. He was talking about my mother. When
That was that house he moved in. It reminded me of being in the South. The windows always open, wasn't air conditioning. And it was always air blowing all over, and then the cooking. You felt the food, that's why
but this thing, stories, just not because she's my mother, but I think that was, all that bullshit they were talking. I said, my mother's story, humble, not seeking any platform, but doing, and so many people, Zakia, so many women and men that have come through free school know my mother better than they know me. And hey, Alice, remember the lady Sandra introduced you to? And I said, she was a good friend of my mother's. And she said, oh yeah, that was my mother. That was all of our mothers.
Wow.
But
very welcoming.
Yeah.
And everybody was her child.
Yeah.
If you were a friend of Tony, you always have a smile and a plate of food. So she didn't look at you like, well, what are you looking at?
Yeah. No, but they didn't, and I agree with everyone. The story is not being told. They're going to talk about Dottie Smith, who was literally like my godmother, my brother's godmother. But she was a singer, and I didn't know about the Dottie Smith Gale. I don't know, but she was apparently married to somebody, and then took his name out. But the whole thing is not being told from the right perspective, and I agree with you. I agree with you too, Jeremiah. This bullshit. So I don't mean to curse, but forgive me. this jive sociology, where they're trying to do ethnography, and then this Ken Burns filmmaking, where you have people talking and photos and all, but they have not told the story. And I think to tell the story, you have to begin with the Black proletariat and the artistic. See, I'm now coming to the conclusion that the art or the proletarian imaginary had two major wings. One was the church. The Black church is a product of a Black proletarian imaginary. To understand the Black church, you have to understand the history of consciousness of Black people. You know what I'm saying? Including Reconstruction, defeat of Reconstruction, and so on. But the other side of it is directly the arts. And this is why we ain't even out of the civil rights movement before John Allen and his colleagues take over Heritage House, this beautiful, unbelievable mansion at Broadmaster, and turn it into Freedom Theater. And not many blocks away from that, Ile Ife, the garden, the village of arts and humanity. Not far from that, Sister Rosie Wallace and the First Church of Faith, Hope, and Deliverance. And then not far from that, this is all North Philly, is Mother Dabney, and ain't this the Garden of Prayer? Now, who except a poet could come up with such a beautiful name? A Garden of Prayer. Think of that. In the middle of North Philadelphia. And Sister Rosie, the First Church of Faith, Hope, and Deliverance. You understand? And so this social system, and they had to break it. They have not broken, it's still here. But you can see the revenge, the bitter hatefulness of Black people. Oh, you going to rise up and have a riot after Martin Luther King is assassinated? We're going to lock all y'all up now. And we got a group of Blackness leaders and Negroes who will become a fig leaf to justify it. Oh, I'm the first Black woman mayor. So what? If we could live on symbols alone, we'd be the richest people in the world. Yeah, we got symbols. This street named after Will Smith, another named after another comedian. Everybody's a comedian or entertainer. Or, oh, we got a big mural of Dr. J. So what? And so a policy, and I think this is what we have to talk about, a policy, what they call the Germans revanchism. Revenge. Because if you get right down to it, I sound like the Delphines. If you get right down to it, they do see Black people as another country. They do see us as an enemy force.
And not welcome.
And not welcome.
I don't care if PhD, you are not welcome.
This is not your country. We want you to know, and it's not your home. And no matter what you do, and that's why you do see it plays into the social psychology. And in the absence of great art, you know, people have nothing to fall back upon but their emotions, their bitterness, and so on.
Music can bring back like so that memory, imaginary, and like it's not physical, like a building or house that you grew up in, but you could hear a song that you heard when you were growing up. So I think part of them trying to wipe that out, I think they always think that the systematic trying to wipe out the African memory. They thought, well, I'll make them Christian and then they'll forget. But what they didn't realize that underneath what appears to be Christian
Right.
is very Africanized.
Yeah.
The function, mutual aid
No,
society.
there's no two ways about it.
Your house burned down, go to the church. Everybody,
And that was the whole foundation, the ethical foundation of Father Divine and Daddy Grace. What they cooperative economics. He may have been the founder of Kwanzaa, going back to the 1930s. Cooperative economics. The Daddy Grace. See, the other thing, you get Mother Dad, Daddy Grace, Father Divine. This is not to be taken lightly. Why would you not only name yourself Daddy Grace, but then sweet Daddy Grace? I mean, it's really a great drama, a great, when you think about it, it's a beautiful thing when you dig it. Here are a people just out of the South set up a united house of prayer for all people when everything is segregated, but they're inviting everybody to come. And Daddy Grace, Father Divine, he got so bold, he went over Canada and brought a white woman back here to marry. He said, yeah. And he claimed that they never had sex, and everybody doubted that. They said that Negro from Georgia with a white woman. But y'all don't know what I'm talking about. Don't worry about it. Okay, but go ahead.
The music jazz is the only true American music, the only that America can claim to be, but they don't claim it. But it is the only true that come out of America. The other music came from Europe and different.
Well, this is a very interesting question. It is a profound question.
Very much.
Because be it jazz or be it the sorrow songs.
Right, I'm about to say.
You know what I'm saying? Everything that Black folk have done has been original. And white people have done hardly anything that's original. And I agree with you, musically, they're almost a zero. They're almost at the zero level. Like I like to say, at the level of an idiot savant when it comes to music. I mean, they need to be ashamed of themselves.
But they claim it. They also even claim that.
Yeah, well, but see, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. No, go ahead. You go ahead.
I made my statement. It is, and doesn't matter if none of y'all do. It is what it is.
It is what it is.
Whoever came up with that saying, it is what it is, or a very intelligent person. It wasn't me. Because guess what? Most things is exactly what it is. Most.
And this is when you talk about the music, when you talk about the imaginary, when you talk about the art, you're talking in the end about a civilization. And America is without a civilization except for Black people. I remember the lady that was here last week, she said to me afterwards, she said, well, everything is Black. Everything that America is comes from Black people, except making war, lying on the regular, perpetrating. I mean, white, and this is why we agree with the Baldwin thing. The only way out for white people is to cease to be white. That's their only hope. Or like the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, they could stop being the devil if they converted to Islam. And then you don't know whether that's enough. But I hope so. I mean, I put my hopes in.
well, you know what happened to, my father used to always say that they were great imitators, and I didn't understand that. because he was a jazz musician, and also he would always point out how they would steal melody. But he said that the African part of black is that it's natural to share. And all the time, say if I go to a club and I play, I want to share it with the white, but he'd write things down while I'm playing. And so my father would say they would catch, he said they catch us off guard because we're trying to share with them and our culture. And they say, oh yeah, okay, take some notes. I'll see you next week. And the next thing you know, they have a recording.
Well, but see,
Or
this,
they write it, they have a book.
but see, this is the
Like they
thing.
did with the Richard. They took
But the thing
everything.
is, see, the question of private property.
Right.
Yeah.
See, that everything is not a good in itself. Its value is in if it makes money. Where art, and this is true of Black people generally, not everybody, but that there are certain things that have value in themselves.
Oh, definitely.
Beauty, truth, freedom.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
can't pay for these things,
Yeah,
and they can't.
uplift your spirit.
That's right, or make you a human being.
Yeah.
This is the great question. And I, you know, I do, the more I think about it, the more I understand y'all's impatience with that whole history thing. You're saying, because, and I know this about Poor Bub, she is, you know, a person that if it does not show Black people in their great heroic achievement, she don't want nothing to do with it. You know, and you know, and she'll look at this North Philly narrative history and say, but they have not indicated the greatness of the people who produce y'all that are giving these interviews. And they become, and Fati, I have to try to say to them, be patient. Alice will say, I was bored. Alice don't have no shame in her game. I'm bored. And I said, yeah, I understand. You know, see, memory, which is just reminiscing, you can't use for anything in the present or future.
Yeah, good old days.
Yeah, the good, everything was the good, everything wasn't the good old days. You know, we couldn't work in most places. We had to demonstrate. I mean, can you imagine everything that a people achieved in a country where they're supposed to be citizens, they had to fight for against resistance of the entire nation? And see, let me just say this, and this is bold. White people gonna have to deal with their cynicism. I'm talking about the white mass. See, y'all ain't home free now. I don't care if you're queer, you want to go with that queer narrative, you know, you want to go with the poverty narrative now. Y'all got a lot of little narratives to pull upon. But don't use them narratives to obscure that you sold out when you could have taken a stance. Everything was funny to you. Black people was a joke to you. See, that's another thing. Hey, John and Cynthia, listen. You remember how they used to make a joke of us in school? The teachers. I ain't talking about the white students only. Everything is a joke. Ha ha ha. They had all these old movies and cartoons, and every Black person looked like a gorilla. You know what I'm saying? Buckwheat, the Bronze Buckaroos, Amos and Andy. The white man created a whole scenario of characters that ain't nobody never saw. Maybe you saw something like it, but ain't nobody never saw no Bronze Buckaroos or Step and Fetch It and all. I mean, first of all, the white, eyes pop as soon as they see a white man, they be running. Listen, the white man, and I know a lot of people say, well, why are you talking about the white man? Because the white man got to be talked about. The white man need to talk more about his own damn self. Yeah, and they created these images of us. Here you have Duke Ellington, Fletcher Henderson, all this great music, and the white man gonna come up with some buckwheat. I never saw no buckwheat or stepping. These are names. Y'all do your Google searches because I ain't got time to explain. Do your Google on it. And everybody, like she said, eyes popping out. And everybody, a black person, you have to have lips that was so big and the lips was red.
Because
Am I lying about you?
No. When I grew up as a kid, because they were black with red lipstick. And I said, Mommy, I don't want one of them dolls. I don't want one of those dolls.
Yeah.
That doll didn't
And
look
the
like
big
that.
lips.
Yeah.
And the
Oh,
big
we were,
lips
yeah.
were
Oh,
red.
yeah. Yeah. Now we have lips bigger than white people,
Yes, we do.
but them lips they put on us, ain't nobody never had. And red.
Red and pink.
And, I mean,
I thought they were the worst
it's some
dolls
the
ever
most
seen.
grotesque images.
But you know what since I've been back to, because I've been going so long, first thing I noticed, I said, what is Black City? I'm walking around, but North Carolina,
Yeah.
Arizona, and you look out the door, everything is either yellow or white.
Yeah.
You come back to the office, heaven. And then the first thing you notice the language, particularly if you've been away. But then I start remembering, I said, I see why they're afraid of the Philadelphia. The Philadelphia black is so strong, the spirit, hard-headed. Because they would tell me when I was in Arizona, I can tell you from the East Coast, they thought I was New York. I said, why? Oh, because you're cocky.
Say that again.
Cocky.
Yeah, cocky.
No, they said assertive, but they slip and say cocky.
Or arrogant.
Yeah, because if I felt I deserved, when I went to the University of Arizona, I wanted to know that Ann Weaver Hart, the president, when she became the president of the University of Arizona.
Okay.
I didn't get a scholarship one semester, so I wrote her a letter. And I went to see her, and they told me, oh, you have to go see so-and-so. Oh, no, I want to talk to her.
Right.
So what I did is I sent certified letter. So then it trickled down. Oh, why do you think they blackballed me from there? And I had 4.0. So I get an email from the head of the Department of Fine Arts. Oh, this is a response to your letter to the president. And I emailed back, said, thank you for your response, but I wrote her. I didn't write you. And then I noticed when I walk in the building, everyone's looking at me like, God, don't fool with him. He's coming here with that New York stuff. See, what it is, when you are a person of color, and okay, if you don't talk, they think you're immigrant because you can be passive and grateful to be here. But when you act like you think you're better than I am, said I can play a minuet and I can play the wah-wah chord. What can you do?
But see, this is a very important question, and it is in social theory, communications theory, these academic disciplines, they study, which they should, and it's a rich area of research, interactions between individuals and what do those relationships say about social relations in general. In other words, I'll take myself, and I hope y'all don't mind me talking about myself a lot today. As a Black man, I know that there's a code of conduct for me in any interaction with the white world. I cannot, and you're right, if my English was more grassroots, I would have a much more difficult time. If I were darker skinned and spoke like most grassroots Black people speak, which is Southern and Philadelphia, I would have a much, yeah. And at this time, as perhaps never before, young black men are the targets of policies of revenge and repression. There is no two ways about it. Many things have set the ideological stage, including radical black feminism. That is the enemy of black unity and of black people. Baldwin even meant. But this is very important, what you say, the study of day-to-day interactive relationships across the color line when they do occur. Usually, relations between black and white people at the individual or collective level are defined by profound insincerity and bad faith on the white people's side. Black people are aware. Cynthia, you all tell me if I'm right about this. Black people are aware that most times in their relationships with white people, they will be lied to. That white people will not be honest with black people.
Truly honest. To some extent, they will be honest, but not truly honest.
No, that's right. And that's an assumption. That is that's a baseline assumption. That's why I just met Cynthia. I could say that, she could say, yeah, because the experience is so common, so much. So the white world expects black people to accept their lies and their bad faith, you know, and they will all the whites will claim, that, well, we didn't know. They always have a default to, we didn't know. Oh, we didn't know that was happening to y'all down in the hood.
But they did.
But they did, and did. Well, the other thing is, but you could know if you wanted to.
Yeah.
But you prefer not to know because you prefer the world of bad faith and lying. I mean, this is what Baldwin struggled with in his sociology. How to deal with what we call the intersubjective. You know, and what does that say about the general society? You know, if you study his novels, you know, especially not go to Another Country and Tell Me How Long the Train's Been Gone, he probes this thing of interracial relationships. The white woman from the South who's attracted to the black musician in New York. You know what I'm saying? And how it is impossible for her to understand him. You know, and it's really
But still attractive. But she's still attractive.
Yeah. She's attracted to him, but cannot know him. And this is maybe a metaphor for black people's relationship to white people. White people are attracted to black. Well, first of all, let's keep it 100. They're attracted to black people's color. They're attracted to black people's skin.
Yep.
They really are. And while they always claim that we are ugly and we don't fit a certain standard of beauty, down below, they are very aware.
They're jealous.
And envious, very jealous. Well, you just take music. So they have not produced, and now it's clear they produce very little of anything, and civilizationally they are unsustainable.
Well, now you understand why Elijah Muhammad said everything is opposite. When they say you're ugly, you're probably beautiful. If they say you're beautiful, you're probably ugly. If they say you didn't play well, you probably played well.
Yeah.
And so I think unconsciously, I noticed when I would go, it's very difficult to make me feel insecure because I know I see well in them, I know they a lot. So I was unconsciously ready, but I didn't know that I knew. And then I said, I see why they think I'm assertive because I don't listen to them. Like I was saying, when I did that Farrelly's play it their way, then I played my way right after that. All of a sudden, oh, you changed it with the composer. I said, that's not the only thing I changed. But when they feel that they have cloned you and you disappoint them, they get angry.
Oh, no question.
Like if I just play the Farrelly's the same way all the time, they would say, oh, that's lovely. But as soon as I go, they say, oh my God.
But let me tell you something. You know, like with them, you know, they're children of immigrants themselves, Chinese. They don't quite know. They have not yet figured out. I think they figured it out a lot more than I know. How white people don't like them. Part of the split between them and their parents is that their parents believe that if they become the model minority, if they become good Chinese and all of that, white people will grow to like you. They're not going to like you because it's not about you, it's really about them.
Oh, the cloning. Look at Temple. If you can play a Mozart sonata or a Rachmaninoff concerto, oh, she's so talented. But you come from Asia and you come there playing something that they can't hear. Or say you're playing Chinese music, the instruments. Oh, why do you want to do that? So basically, they play a game, strip you from your culture and smile at you. So as long as you play Mozart, just don't play any of that Chinese stuff, and you get your PhD. Matter of fact, you get an honor.
Well, and the real thing, the real challenge for them is their relationship to black people, not their relationship to white people. And as long as the immigrant privileges or prioritizes their relationship to white people, they will always be in a state of trauma, of even schizophrenia, mental illness. It's a submerged, it's a controlled form of mental illness, but they're mentally ill. To go along, to accept the belittlement, and to the credit of black people, that fighting spirit does not permit us to. It's very difficult to be an Uncle Tom these days. It used to be easier to be an Uncle Tom than to be a militant.
Well, now you understand this ESL.
But this is a different.
Get the
Okay.
immigrant, stick them in that ESL class, and it's not just an Americanization process, it's a whitening process and values that go.
Yeah.
You don't want to talk like those people on 19th and Diamond, if they're brown and they spoke good. So you grow up and you unconsciously draw to people who speak standard. You don't know that you're being white. You don't know what it is. You just know you're you're alienated from your parents, you're alienated from the black community, and then you know that the white don't really like you because 1 minute they speak to you, next minute they don't.
Yeah.
1 minute they understand you, next minute they say, what did you say? You know, because they want you to talk, they even want you to tell their jokes. They want you to tell jokes like, oh, he's pulling my leg. Oh, she knows me. Yeah. You know, you say he's bamboozled me.
Well, y'all, it's 2:00.
Maybe we could end with comments. We could
Yes.
read comments and then just re-announce the event,
Oh,
upcoming
yes.
event,
Okay.
and then we can end.
Okay, so, people in the comments say good morning, Free School, Todd Doherty, Bombalai 7, M Sparks. Michelle Bell said, good morning, faculty of Free School. I just caught up with the second half of last week's discussion. It was an awesome discussion of immigration and the labor market and its impacts on native-born African Americans. Someone named Kwame Madden said, deep
Oh, Kwame, hey, man.
Oh yeah, the deep stuff. As Doc was talking in the beginning. Blaze says, "Good morning, everyone. Listening today on my way to a family gathering for my grandmother's birthday." Bombalai said, "Yeah, African grassroots socialism. We eat instead of I eat. No man is an island. This principle." Michelle Bell liked the phrase nickel and dime espionage. BK says the paternalistic social conditioning of whiteness. And then when we were talking about, I guess like the way Black people talk, Michelle Bell said, more rounded vowels, more enunciated consonants, stronger distinction of stressed syllables and words. Bombalai adds, it's about imparting feelings into the words, like singing. You know what someone is saying without even hearing the words per se.
That's true.
And then there was someone named Jaribu Mapinduzi who said, simultaneous to the late stage of deindustrialization, there was a state-sponsored chemical warfare on African people. Crack cocaine and the fusion of weapons. And said, I love this gathering and dialogue. Great to hear the acknowledgement of the significance of international revolutionary African culture to the movement, but then had disagreements around the move and saying that move was not counter-revolutionary and that that move was more of an anarchic organization beneficial to revolution because they did at least resist state control and many of them segued into revolutionary movement. So they had a question of, why do you define them as counter-revolution?
Well, and I'd like to talk to him more about this, but their behavior in relationship to the Black community. They were always celebrated by almost the entire white left, especially the anarchists, ultra-leftists, as revolutionaries. They were absolutely not that. And a revolutionary is measured or determined by their relationship to their people. You attack your own people, their churches, their institutions. You carry out a how could you say it? A policy of slash and burn. We're going to tear the Black community down because you're reactionary. To attack the very people that have been in the forefront of progress, which they did, and I could, I can prove it. I can show it.
I lived it.
You lived
And I saw what they did.
Yeah.
Me and my mother went to and gave the new people food. They kicked our food off of the thing and cussed us up and told us to get the so-and-so. Terrible.
Is this out on Powelton Avenue? Yeah. See, that's
I lived it with my mother. My mother said, let's go down there and take them some food. The people need, and I'm like, okay, mommy, we got all things together. We put our food down and said, we bought the food for y'all to, we don't need your so-and-so, so. Like
and she
four
ain't
of them pressed us out and kicked the food that we bought off of the thing that we put it on and told us to get the so-and-so out of there.
That's
And
right.
that's what we did. I said, mommy, love, they gonna put your hand on my mommy. Fine, walked away. That was my personal incident with the movie.
That's
With
right.
John Africa, who was the head of an older man, who they had said they counted by heart. I don't know. That's
See,
mine.
and the brother that was, all of that, all of that romanticizing, that's a mythological construction of that. And they were good at that. I mean, really good at it. And a lot of people think because of, the events out on Osage Avenue, because of Powelton Village and all of that, that they were standing up to the police. No, they weren't. No, they weren't.
They were given land to move to,
Yeah,
and they turned the land down.
If you want to go back to nature, yeah.
I remember because I lived with them. They turned the land down and chose to stay up there where they were at. And that's what caused the whole thing with
Yeah,
this.
and they destabilized the struggle, they destabilized the Black community, they attacked Black people, and
They terrorized the community
That's
on the rooftops. On the rooftops, terrorized people with bullhorns through the night, 4 o'clock in the morning, actually bullhorns. This is the movie.
Well, I was gonna say that I've been listening to the podcast "Murder on Ryan's Run" by Beth McNamara, but she has some other work that she's done, and she was talking about some of the Hollywood people who have come to Philadelphia to make a movie about the bombing and everything. And the reason why they can't do anything in Hollywood is anytime someone comes to do their homework, they find the articles in the Philadelphia Inquirer and such about all the children that have died on blue property because they starved to death. And so you can find this out. It's been published. Some journalists have done the work, but for some reason, this narrative continues about Move that they were
Dick
innocent.
Gregory,
Say
the
it again.
great Dick Gregory came to Philadelphia to help with this thing. And he said they the most ignorant people I ever seen. I'm getting the hell out of Philly. And that's what he did. They cussed him out, told us, made him feel. He left here. He said, I ain't never seen people like this. But he came here to try to bring some kind.
Well, Vincent Leapart, who was John Africa, he was part of an experiment from the university. He was part of a graduate student who was part of University of Pennsylvania, and he was doing an experiment on, it was basically, that was his project, that was his thesis, was Vincent Leapart and the religion of Move, and he encouraged this, and he wrote down, this student from UPenn wrote down the guidelines that became, Move law. And so you cannot remove this connection to the University of Pennsylvania.
Because they all were very educated. They were all educated right here in Philadelphia at different colleges here.
Well, actually, they weren't.
Some of them were.
Yeah, some of them were.
I never think, oh, I should
Yeah,
use that
no,
word, 'cause I don't know. But a lot of
Yeah,
them were.
but it was you're right.
They were
And I didn't live out there, but man, it was a destructive.
But there was another cult in the 60s out in Oakland called the
Symbionese Liberation Army.
And it's almost the same thing. You have educated people, they get caught up in a cult, and just very destructive.
But see, I think what we have to understand is COINTELPRO.
That's what I'm saying.
See, it's not spontaneous. And the more I look at this, the more I look at it, and I know them, friends with them, including Mumi and all of them. Friends, know them, know all of them. But ain't nowhere in the world, when I look at all of this, I would be lying to say they were anything other than a counter-revolutionary force that was controlled by forces other than themselves. And another thing that we have to take into account, there was probably a lot of use of various types of drugs to stimulate certain behaviors.
Because they stayed up all,
Yeah.
night and terrorized the neighborhood.
Yeah.
4 in the
So
morning.
it was something, it was more to them than meets the eye.
And they also knew that they were putting gasoline on those rooftops. So they knew when they dropped that detonator, that it would blow up and burn the whole community. And they also knew, because the neighbors told them, they smelled gasoline. They were running gasoline from one end of the block to the next end. So when that detonator was dropped on there, that's why the whole thing went up like the way it went up, because of the gasoline that was on. And I still, to the day, the first black mayor, I know my voice still haunts him, because he tried to hold my baby, as a newborn baby, after this whole incident happened, and I had to tell him, you know who I'm talking about? Do y'all know who our first black mayor?
Oh, Wilson Good.
Wilson W. Good. And I told him, you can't touch my baby. You should have got those children out of that house. Because with their parents' agenda, the children should not have died of something.
But you know something, and Cynthia, and I'm going to say this, and I get it from McNamara's podcast. It's worth. We'll share that with you. It's long. It's been going on for some time. But here's what I will. See, I'm not convinced that they felt that they had created a fireproof bunker in the whole house. And they could have let the children out.
They went out every day and walked along that whole strip, if you know.
Yeah, right.
In West Philly. Okay. They would go out because they was into exercise. I don't know how you do it, but some kind of way those children weren't supposed to be murdered and died in that fire. And they sent them back into the fire. I don't know if y'all know about it, but I was living in Upper Darby. And you know how close Upper Darby is to that. I was one of the first black persons in Upper Darby at this time, in the 80s. And they ran them back into the fire. They did not let them come out. They shot them back into the fire.
That's one narrative. See, but we'll come back to that. Yeah.
And just to finish up the comments, M. Spark said that the quote unquote Neanderthal, I think meaning white people or the white middle class is the common enemy. Then Jaribu, who brought up Move earlier, said, great to see the unity of Asians and Africans in this circle. Asian people here can relate to the land of their ancestral origin and don't have to classify themselves as yellow. The terms black and white are white supremacist constructs of so-called race. The term is incomplete because it doesn't connect us with the global African struggle. But then BK responded to Jaribu and said, why would you dismiss the Native American Negroes who came here, I guess, pre the transatlantic slave trade or during the transatlantic slave trade? Furthermore, what African nations have claimed and welcomed back Black Americans? None. And then, yeah, so Jaribu just had a further disagreement about MOVE. Someone named London Du Bois said that the MOVE organization rejected modern technology and medicine.
No, it didn't.
Okay. Okay, yeah, so there's more discussion if people can go back and read. And, yeah, so that's basically.
I think in public they reject technology, but in private they go to France and they fly to mansions and they treated Mumia's grandson to a
Well,
shop.
they claim to be vegetarians, but eat steak sandwich.
Yeah.
I'm not hating. I'm just, appreciating.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to say because if you want to enter the militant left movement in Philadelphia, you have to at some point reach Mumia's camp. You have to at some point go through that, and it's a big con. And I feel sort of betrayed, and sort of the way that people were betrayed by going to the North Philly Festival. Like, where is this grassroots?
Right.
Where is everybody? Not to be offensive to your generation, you Doc, but like, where are the OGs?
Yeah. Well, I'm an OG. I'm an OG in the movement too, and I can tell you this: it's a tragedy that so many young people who were not familiar with the history of Black people got caught up in MOVE because they thought they were making a moral choice, when in fact it was a mistake. The whole thing was a mistake. But you want to say something, Dwight?
No, I just wanted to say that all of the stories that I'm telling represent psychological damage done to Black people. It's good to hear you talk about it.
See, people talk about psychological damage, but I'm also interested in the ideological damage because let me tell you this. I don't see how. See, you could talk about people who have been traumatized by their experience, but also part of the traumatization and the psychological problems have to do with a failure of ideological clarity about just what the Black experience. But that's an ideological category. So I don't separate the psychological from the ideological, nor from the history of consciousness of a people. They're all linked.
And I was going to say again, if I heard everything you said, what you said about North Philadelphia, it mirrors every city, Newark, New Jersey, Cleveland, in your experience.
Absolutely.
Chicago. Oftentimes, people talk about Black experience. But your experience represents the mass. That experience that you have, that's the experience of a lot of people, a lot of people, about Black and White.
Yeah.
Also, I just want to say, Jeremiah, you talk about like New York, Philadelphia has housing. New York, we have a park. And it was easy, like I remember I was in New York, and we would go around the park, it was easy to go to court, they were big people, so we go to New York City, that's why a lot of Black people move back. And then you have big people come in, say, the Dominican Republic, you have superintendent, And then they said, black person go to the dinner party, we don't have any patients. So they would bring in homes, and that's throughout New York City. So that's how gentrification in New York City. And that's part. But I agree with everything. Ideology, condition. all
No
that.
question, no question, no question. And see,
No, that was early black Muslim movement, but I remember it's, black Muslims calling Christians lost families. So a lot of times when the ideologies come not quite set with the follower, they're very selective for what
Yeah.
of and they're not necessarily thinking of the whole thing. And then you end up with a kind of separate movement, like they're protesting, but I don't hang out with Christians. You know that schism between black Muslims and Martin Luther King began. It was now later. I don't feel so much now, but in the beginning, I remember Muhammad speak that, and then, what are you doing hanging out with Christians? So so-and-so like Christian, so-and-so that kind of stick. You know, either you're a Christian, and it's lost family. You know, and that's a very powerful word.
yeah,
Okay, you're not like me, so you're lost family. And so I can see how somebody gets stuck in the mud with a little bit of information, and you think that you follow ideology, but because you haven't fully processed it, you're developing these discriminations within yourself,
yeah,
and you don't know the root of it.
yeah. Yeah, and that's also an area of sociological study where you study just like you take individuals. Let's say you're going to study members of the Nation of Islam who did between 3 and 10 years in the penitentiary, and now they're out and they're members of, and just to study them, to interview them, and to talk about their personal histories is a way of understanding a people and a movement. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. Because this kind of crisis of the American system cannot be resolved without a heroic effort on the part of the people, and especially Black people. Black people will be called upon to perform literally miracles, magic, as it were.
On that note, I know one of the last things we really wanted to do is also announce your lecture that we've finally been able to reschedule at the Lucian Blackwell Library. But I also think that the topic that you chose of the study of art and the search for Black gods, a Du Boisian lecture on this topic today. I feel like what we actually got really concretely done. We also have flyers for that lecture on Tuesday, August the 5th. 4:30, which will also record and be able to upload afterwards. Something that I think in your remarks today in the beginning also did was begin to continue to define and characterize and put language to what we've been describing the past few weeks about what we mean by Black gods, which I think today, actually combining it with this discussion of deindustrialization, but also what it is that we are really what really is the key to.
Or what is the relationship between the people's gods and deindustrialization?
Right. And how that might provide a colored alternative for this moment of so much bleakness and darkness, but also a lot of lies, a lot of fraudulent, narratives about North Philadelphia and Black folk. But the lecture will be one way that we're actually also kicking off a new chapter of the reading group at the Lucian Blackwell Library that will continue on Tuesdays at 4:30, and we'll be continuing to read Du Bois, but specifically his 1920 Darkwater collection of essays, which contains a lot of essays I know have been really impactful for a lot of us in free school, such as The Immortal Child or The Souls of White Folk, The Damnation of Woman, just a couple of things that we might explore in that reading group. So we're excited to announce that.
Our families will.
Jesus of the Distant. Hey, Doc.
Oh, yeah.
Right off the first.
Okay, well, we're ending the live stream and we'll see everyone next Saturday. For another free school. Yeah, same place. 10 a.m.